Welcome to this meeting of the Maidenhead Development Management Committee on the 20th of November 2025. My name is Councillor Shah Martin and I will be chairing the meeting. This meeting has been held in person via Zoom and streamed live to the public on YouTube. I remind all attendees that participation in the meeting indicates consent to the audio and video being streamed live and acknowledgement that after the meeting it will continue to be available in the public domain. We are not expecting the fire alarm to sound this evening. However, if it does, please may I ask you to leave in an orderly fashion and rendezvous across the road outside of the library next to the fountain. First, it would be useful if all voting members and officers could introduce themselves so that the public are aware who is in the meeting and the role they're undertaking. So if I start with my left, and then we'll run to the back row and then go clockwise after that.
Adrian Waite, the Assistant Director of Planning, here to advise committee.
Yep, James Cross, Major Sites Team Leader.
David Brett, Senior Planning Officer.
Sarah White, partner with WBD Solicitors, acting for the committee on legal matters.
I'm Jack Barber, a barrister from Cornerstone Barristers. I'm instructed by the Royal Borough of Windsor Maidenhead.
Councillor Clive Baskerville, voting member of the panel.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Councillor Jack Douglas, a voting member of the panel.
Hi, good evening. Councillor Gurch Singh, voting member of the panel.
Councillor Gosling, substituting for Leo Waters, voting member of the panel.
Councillor Taylor, voting member of the panel.
Lawrence Ayres, Democratic Services, and I'm here to observe my colleague Mikey.
Mikey Lloyd, Democratic Service Officer and Clerk to tonight's committee.
Thank you. And currently off camera, we've got Maria Michael, officers dealing with the Nicholsons and also the Cookham application. I request that the meeting participants do not speak until I specifically invite you to do so. Once I've invited you to speak, before you do so, please state your name and the capacity in which you are speaking if appropriate. I will also ask officers to speak at appropriate times. If any individual attempts to disrupt the meeting, I'm able to use my powers in the Constitution to adjourn the meeting or have the individual removed. I'd like to remind councillors that to improve our time and effectiveness as a committee, I'd ask you to limit the repetition of points or questions which have already been raised by others. Where possible, please forward all new points or questions which you would like raised during your request to speak. We will now start on the agenda items. Firstly, do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, we've had apologies from Councillor Hill, who is substituted by Councillor Baskerville, and Councillor Waters, who is substituted by Councillor Gosling. And obviously we have noted that due to some traffic, there is a potential lateness, so Councillor Kashmir Singh is on his way.
Thank you, Mikey. Do we have any declarations of interest? Councillor Taylor?
Thank you, Chair. It's just for transparency, really. I've received an email from the developers after the deferral of the last application, inviting me to a meeting, which I declined because I didn't feel it was appropriate for a panel member to be in a meeting outside of the normal planning process. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just two declarations. Just one, I've had conversations with the applicant for Nicholson Quarter and obviously carried out site visits with officers, but I come here with an open mind. And also number 6, item number 6 on the agenda, Florence Avenue. The applicant there is known to me as a resident, but again, I've had conversations, but I come here with an open mind. Thank you.
Yeah, very similar from me. I've had conversation with the applicant on the Nicholson development since the deferral, and here with an open mind. Also, the land at 6 and 8 Florence Avenue, just to declare to myself, I called in the application, but I didn't do so because I'm predetermined. I did so because I think it's necessary for committee to weigh up the flooding aspect with the benefit of the unique sort of passive house design. Thank you, Chair.
Douglas, Councillor Singh, you've got your button pressed. Did you need to say anything else? No. And agenda item number 3 is the minutes. Are we happy to approve the minutes held on Thursday, the 16th of October as true and accurate? Happy. Thank you. As we still haven't got Councillor Kashmir Singh in the room, and I would like a full panel for Nicholsons, I'm going to start, reason being, we've got full speakers in the room, so I'm going to start with Florence Avenue in Maidenhead. So could I hand over to David to present that one, please?
Thank you, Chair. Item 3 has been called in to be decided at this committee. The proposal site consists of land to the rear of 6 and 8 Florence Avenue in Maidenhead. And the application seeks full planning permission for the erection of a 2-storey, 1-bedroom passive house dwelling. This follows the demolition of the existing single-storey garage. This submission follows the refusal of application 2501110 in July 2025, which was determined at this committee. There is one update to this item, which consists of an updated proposed front elevation. This is to correct the position of a ground floor window and the submission of a passive house planning package model. The site is outlined in red, as shown on the proposed location plan. The site is located on the outside dogleg of Florence Avenue, with 4A to the north of the site and the existing dwellings at 6 and 8 Florence Avenue to the south of the site. The immediate surrounding area consists predominantly of 2-storey dwellings, with St. Luke's School located 100 metres to the west of the site. The proposed dwelling would be largely located upon the footprint of the existing garage, set off the boundary to 4A Florence Avenue by 1.7 metres. The site would benefit from one off-street vehicle parking space, with a rear garden of approximately 100 metres squared. The proposed floor plans indicate a kitchen, living and dining room, and a WC to the ground floor. The first floor consists of a bathroom, double bedroom, storage cupboard, and additional storage space within the roof space of the covered parking bay. Solar panels are proposed to the south-facing roof slope, facing towards the existing dwellings at 6 and 8 Florence Avenue. As set out in the description of development, the design of the dwelling has sought to achieve passive house standard. Upon review of the technical documents by the Council Sustainability team, it is considered that this has been suitably evidenced within the submission that the design would achieve passive house standard. Aside from the addition of a footpath towards the north boundary of the site, the development proposed is identical to that refused at committee under application 2501110 in July 2025, which was refused due to matters relating to flood risk only. For application 2501110, officers had previously recommended a character reason for refusal, with a development considered contrary to the general grain and pattern of development. However, the committee resolved to not include this reason. As such, officers have not recommended a character reason for refusal for this application, given the fallback position in the form of the recent decision, which only includes a flood risk reason for refusal, which the applicant can still appeal. The main constraint is that the site is located in flood zone 3. The NPPF approach is to steer new development to areas with the lowest risk of flooding from any source using a sequential test. Policy NR1 of the Borough Local Plan encourages applications within the relevant flood zones to carry out a sequential test and demonstrate that there are no reasonably available sites for the development in areas at a lower risk of flooding. A sequential test has been carried out by the applicant. However, upon review, officers consider that the sequential test does not adequately demonstrate that there are no reasonably available sites within the borough, or within Maidenhead, I should say, with a lower risk of flooding. Officers have taken account of the flood risk planning practice guidance, which was updated in September 2025, and still consider that development does not pass the sequential test, as set out in the main report. Furthermore, the Environment Agency have reviewed the flood risk assessment provided for this application and object on the basis that the assessment fails to properly assess floodplain storage compensation, demonstrating that development will not increase flood risk elsewhere. Again, this was the case for the previous application under 2501110. To conclude, development is within flood zone 3 and the application is required to pass the sequential test. Based on information provided for this application, the sequential test has not passed. Furthermore, the flood risk assessment does not properly assess floodplain storage compensation, failing to demonstrate that the development will not increase flood risk elsewhere, with the Environment Agency maintaining an objection to the development. The recommendation is therefore to refuse planning permission for the reasons set out in the main report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. Before I open it up to the floor, we have one speaker on this one. That's Mumtaz Alam. If I can call you up to the chair over there. And when you're ready, you've got 3 minutes with a 1-minute warning. David, can I ask you to stop slide sharing it? Thank you.
Do I just press the red button? Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for allowing me to speak in support of today's application. I would like to begin by noting this is the second time the proposal has come before you. The previous application was refused for one reason only: the flood risk matters relating to sequential test and assumptions about whether the existing garage was floodable. No concerns were raised regarding the design, massing, scale, and appearance, or the principle of the development. Members were supportive of all these aspects. At the last hearing, members also expressed enthusiasm for what would be the first passive house dwelling in Maidenhead, recognising both the sustainability credentials and the design quality of the proposal. The only unresolved issue at that stage was the technical evidence available regarding the existing garage structure. This resubmission is identical in all aspects. The only additions are the technical documents directly addressing the previous reasons for refusal. These include evidence confirming that the existing garage is of solid masonry construction with a sealed reinforced garage door and does not allow water ingress. It is relevant that the Environment Agency did not inspect the structure, and their early assessment was based on assumptions only. The evidence before you today demonstrates clearly that the garage is not a floodable void. In addition, although we do not rely on this point, the existing garage could readily be altered at any time without recourse to planning permission, for instance, removing the garage door entirely and breaking up the frontage, effectively creating a fully enclosed outbuilding. This simply illustrates that the concerns about the current garage door are, in practical terms, academic. A revised sequential test has been prepared by our planning consultants and has also been submitted to demonstrate that there are no reasonable
1 minute remaining
in areas of lower flood risk for a development of this type. Importantly, the lead local flood authority raised no objections. They recommended only a standard pre-commencement condition requiring a detailed surface water drainage scheme be agreed before works begins. Their position confirms that they're subject to this condition. The development will not increase flood risk on or off the site. In summary, every aspect of the proposal was previously supported except for one technical matter, which has now been fully addressed. No technical consultants object to the application that stands today. We therefore respectfully ask the panel to recognise the sole reason for refusal has been overcome and grant permission for this high quality, sustainable passive house. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mumtaz. So I'm ready to open this up to the floor. Has anybody got any questions on this particular application before we go into debate? I can go straight to debate if that's preferable. So we have any speakers on this? Councillor Gosling?
I just wanted to clarify a few things. The garage has been standing here for quite a long time. Have there been any incidents of flooding around the garage that you know of? I'm addressing this as planning officer.
Not that I'm directly aware of. I mean, it's mainly a part of the flood risk assessment that we take that, we would use that as part of considering the floodability of the garage. I mean, as it stands, we have an objection from the EA stating that it's not been properly assessed and that the design of a dwelling doesn't take into account the existing garage. And that's, but in terms of, but to go back to directly answering your question, I'm not aware of any flooding incidents at the top of my head, but nevertheless, the site is within flood zone 3, which indicates that there is a high risk of flooding at the site.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Douglas, please.
Thank you, Chair. Most of us remember we talked quite a lot about this sustainable passive house design last time round. Obviously, it's something we'd love to see more of in, all else being equal. I just want to say the question, I think, for the panel is whether this environmental benefits are enough to outweigh the flood risk. The flood risk is there. Officers obviously deemed it sufficient to be enough to recommend refusal. My own sort of mind is on the fence a little bit, but I guess I'm leaning towards saying no, the benefits outweigh the harms here, but I'm still got an open mind. I'm interested to hear what other members say before making up my mind fully. Thank you.
Councillor Gershing, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Look, this is it's a tricky one. I mean, this is in the ward. I know the area really well. There's houses all the way around this site. And passive house design, I mean, this is sort of exactly the sort of property that, we want to be building in the borough, and we want applicants to come forward with, I mean, it drastically reduces consumption, super insulation, lower bills. It's a really, really clever little infill development. There obviously are issues there within because it does sit in the flood zone. And although the maps have moved, it's just on the edge. And I'm just, I do like it, and I like the benefits, the sustainable benefits. And this is something that we need to be supporting and promoting. And I'm just thinking, can we mitigate the risk of flooding in some way? Because effectively, if you think of it in common sense terms, I mean, if the ground is solid under the garage at the moment, and we've got a solid concrete base, and we remove that and we add a floodable area, and whether we can do that by way of a condition, some sort of flood plan sort of compensation. I'm just thinking outside the box, because I know in the past we have had houses in that area which have been raised. I'm just thinking, is that a possibility? Can we get it through by way of condition?
I'll just bring Adrian in on your point there.
Yes.
Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. So I think I have to go back to kind of first principles of how flooding policy works to deal with this. So flooding policy works with two tests. We have flood zones, and there are three. Well, there are four. There's 3A and 3B, but largely three. Flood zones. Flood zone 3 is the area that's the highest likelihood of flooding. So 1 in 100-year likelihood of flooding. So the fact that an officer in the room may not be aware of if the site is flooded or not, it isn't relevant to that. What is relevant is that on the modelling that the Environment Agency, etc., do, the site has a 1 in 100-year risk of flooding, so a 1% chance of flooding.
1%, okay. So, okay. That's
yeah.
quite, okay.
And the way that flood policy works is the idea is that you avoid placing buildings or residents in areas that are liable to flood for two reasons. One, because any structures you place there may displace floodwater and increase the risk of flooding elsewhere. Secondly, because any resident or property you put there, the property will be liable to receive flood damage and the residents will potentially be placed in danger or place additional burdens on the emergency services if there is a flood event. So the first thing you do is apply the sequential test, which says, is there anywhere else under the new flood risk policy in that town which could accommodate the type of development? The view of officers is that there clearly are other sites within the town of Maidenhead that could accommodate one residential unit. So the view the officers have put forward in the report is that it doesn't pass that test. Even if the development were to pass the sequential test, to move towards approving it, you'd have to move on to the exceptions test. And the exceptions test sets out, A, you look at mitigation, but B, you still shouldn't approve the development unless the wider sustainability benefits of the development significantly outweigh the flood risk. And if you look at the MPPF on what it means by wider sustainability benefits, it means things such as providing a facility that's required that can't be provided elsewhere, providing a community facility that's much needed, or something like that. So something with quite a large benefit to the area or the population to outweigh the potential risks. What I would say and what my advice would be is the passive house design, while it's nice and positive and something we would encourage, it is very difficult to actually see it as a benefit. Passive house is effectively a standard of design to reduce carbon emissions. Our policies seek to try and achieve net zero anyway. So realistically, in terms of carbon emissions, it's no different from any other development that's complying with our policies and achieving the net zero aim. And ultimately, it means that it has no emissions. So really, it's a no harm sum, if that makes sense. There's no emissions, so there's no harm. It's not a benefit. There would be a benefit through providing one additional home, and we are in housing need, but it's difficult to say that one home is a wider sustainability benefit in terms of flooding policy. Indeed, if members were to go down that route, and bearing in mind we're meant to make consistent decisions, you would potentially find other people looking at this decision and find lots of houses being submitted in the flood zone, simply claiming that they were going to be passive house to try and get around the flood policy, and you could have significant issues. So while I appreciate members like the fact that it's passive house design, and that is a positive, I think we have to bear in mind the wider tests, and particularly the fact that to try and approve, you would have to find wider sustainability benefits, and I just can't see how they are here for a single house. But obviously, it's members' decision to debate.
Okay, thank you for that response. I'll listen to the rest of the debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really disappointed in this, the way it's come back. It wouldn't take much to actually raise the house and have it so that there was a void underneath to mitigate the flooding. It's done all over Maidenhead. We've got some in my ward. And it would have been nice to be able to champion this type of build. But there's no excuse to be building in floodplain. It's surface water flooding. We've got surface water flooding now in my ward in Desborough Park, where we've never had it before. We've had water coming into people's houses, and it's a very serious issue. So I'm disappointed this wasn't taken into account, given the refusal the first time round. And it's a real shame, because the design is really nice. The theory behind it is brilliant, and that's what we want to try and encourage. But I just can't you can't get past the flooding issue and putting people's lives in danger. So I don't think I'm going to be able to support this.
Thank you. Councillor Douglas, please.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Helen's just said. It's disappointing that the design doesn't provide any flood storage on site if it could. But that takes me back to Councillor Singh's question. Adrian, you gave a very sort of long, comprehensive answer on the basics of flood risk and policy. But do we have an answer on the question of whether we can condition any flood storage on site, particularly in the garage area?
I mean, at the moment, we've got an objection from the Environment Agency. We've got no idea whether we can provide adequate flood storage on site. To be frank, even if it did have adequate flood storage on site, it wouldn't come close to getting around the sequential requirements or the need for wider sustainability benefits. So it would reduce the potential for off-site flooding if there was adequate flood storage on site, but you would still be placing an additional resident on a site that's liable to flooding, which would be contrary to policy, and you'd still need to look for wider sustainability benefits to outweigh the harm. So my answer would have to be, without adequate details and with an objection from the Environment Agency, I couldn't tell you that it's possible to condition adequate flood storage on site because we don't know if it's technically possible.
Do you want to come back, Councillor Douglas? I'll bring you in after.
Thank you, Chair. If I could briefly, yeah. So I think I take it from your answer that it is possible to condition flood storage, just we couldn't say whether it's adequate or not, which is fine. I think from your earlier reply, I think it's also true to say that it's impossible to pass a sequential test for a single dwelling, basically. So it kind of becomes an academic exercise. So just correct me if I'm wrong on either of those. So just on the wider sustainability, the only thought in my mind is that there's a unique benefit perhaps in this particular dwelling that wouldn't apply to, opening the floodgates, if you pardon the expression, to everyone building in the floodplain, in that it's the first passive house. So in a sense, it could serve as an exemplar, as a sort of a trailblazer, which uniquely sort of is there to, encourage other developers, other landowners to build the sort of design that we're trying to encourage. Anyway, that's just my thoughts. Thank you.
I'm just going to bring in the officers. Councillor Douglas.
Yeah, there's 2 points there just to go back on, which is about can the flood storage be conditioned? I mean, the answer is, the starting point here is you've got an EA objection, which is a statutory consultee. If there were a way forward, i.e. a mitigation measure, which you'd use a condition, they would normally set that out to us. But we've got to consider tonight the plans that are before you. The problem is with flood storage, it can have a knock-on effect in terms of building heights, appearance on the streetscape, etc., etc. So what you're really looking at that point is a different permission or a different application. And that's not what's before you tonight. So we've got no evidence to say that a suitable compensatory flood storage measures would work in all other aspects. So you really do have to consider what you've got tonight is the truthful answer, really. Do Adrian want to come on the next point?
Do you want to come in, Adrian?
Well, so just coming in on could it serve as an exemplar or from being the first one? I would just say I think that is a very, very risky and poor basis for a planning decision. I mean, the sustainability benefits of a passive house, whether it's the first passive house or the second passive house, are largely the same. A council is required to try and make consistent decisions. I think if you tried to take forward that logic, you'd effectively be saying, well, allow this passive house because it's the first one, but every other passive house in the floodplain will be treated differently because it's not the first one, and that seems a very risky basis on which to try and make a decision.
Thank you. Councillor Gosling, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question is, is it possible to build houses on floodplains? And if this had been presented differently, as you're saying, it's in a flooding area, but we haven't seen any flooding, would you be considering, hypothetically, houses built on floodplains in this area? Because we know that the Thames Valley has a lot of flooding. Thank you.
Well, generally, no as a default, unless the wider sustainability benefits significantly outweigh the flooding risks. So in openness, you may, if you had a particularly unique proposal for something that couldn't be delivered elsewhere and was going to be a real benefit to the community, justify building in the floodplain. You could perhaps, for a very significant proposal that was going to provide large benefits to the borough, justify it, although you would normally be looking to try and identify sites for that through a local plan process, not through the development management process. But for an individual single house, it would be very difficult to ever pass those tests.
Thank you. Can I go back to Councillor Taylor, please?
Thank you, Chair. I think regrettably, I'm going to have to table a motion to go with officer recommendations to refuse. I just don't see how we're going to get around this issue, given the EA objection and everything else that's going on. I would really hope that maybe this may come back, but with, you know, that mitigation in there in the design. But as it stands currently, I think I'm putting a motion down. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. I actually have no other speakers on the board at all. Is anyone prepared to second that or want to speak? Councillor Baskerville, please.
Yeah, I'll just second it. I agree with Councillor Taylor. I mean, it really does need to come back with mitigating reasons. Thank you.
Councillor Kashmir Singh, please.
Thank you, Chair. And sorry, I was late. I sent my apologies via Councillor Singh. I want to ask the officers, we've had lots of applications where we've had lots of projects which were in flood zone, known the areas were flooding, unlike this particular property for years, 50 years, 70 years, and I can go into detail if you wish. And when the officers say, oh, it's a 100 year event, things have moved on. And not only that, those people who don't live in this area are not aware of that. And when they flood every year, is it more to do with when we have lots of properties being built? For example, the one by Alderbury Road, where they're building 330 homes and a school, and that's floods every year. And the flooding is there for 3 or 4 months at a time. So how is this different? Because is it because it is just one property? Is that what we take into account? And the S106? Does that override the flooding issues? Thank you.
We are talking about 2 different applications, but I will bring in the officers on that for you, Councillor Singh.
Yeah, Chair, it's just a procedural point. Can I bring in Sarah White, please, just to make some commentary, please?
I'm just concerned, I don't think Councillor Singh was here for the presentation. So just to remind Councillor Singh that he can't vote on this matter.
I was listening to it on the way when I was on YouTube when I was travelling here.
Councillor Singh, you won't be voting on this because you weren't in the room, but we'll just have to take your word for it on that one. But yeah, thank you. Right, I have no other speakers. Oh, Councillor Douglas, quickly. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, look, I really do understand what officers have been saying, and Helen and Clive, so it's pretty obvious which way the room's going. But I mean, my feeling is that we can't let, I mean, policy is clearly not what's on top of everyone's minds at the moment, flood risk, but you know, there's some element of common sense which I feel we're missing here, which is that it's currently concrete. And there's not going to be increased flood risk when you put a house on top of it. But so in terms of policy, is that the only thing that matters? Well, we can't fetter our discretion. No policy can fetter our discretion. And I do think we have the discretion to use common sense here, but, you know, obviously I accept the majority. But in that sense, I'll table a motion to approve. But we'll see.
Thank you, councillor Douglas. So I have a motion on table, which is proposed by councillor Taylor and seconded by councillor Baskerville. Are we ready to go to the vote?
Just to clarify, councillors, it's green to obviously vote for refusal, red to vote against refusal, and yellow for abstaining from the vote.
Councillor Baskerville, you just press the green on the screen. I haven't got your vote recorded yet. Is it not working? Yeah. Can we do councillor Baskerville manually on this one or? Sorry.
It's because councillor Cassini's on that side.
Okay. Mhm. Just a bit of a tech issue, councillor Baskerville. It should work again in a minute. I'll let you know.
Confirm what the actual what is being proposed, please, and what are we voting on?
To go with officers'
Okay,
recommendations.
thank you. Thanks.
Has it come up on the screen now, councillor Baskerville? Yes, there we go.
Do you want us all to vote?
If you'd like to vote again, please, Chair.
Thank
Yes, it
you.
is now working on councillor Baskerville's. Apologies for that. Everyone happy with their vote? Thank you. So everyone has voted, Chair. So that is 3 for, 2 against and 1 abstention. So the motion to refuse does pass.
Thank you. Thank you. So we're moving, because we had a bit of a juggle on the agenda, we're moving to agenda item number 4 now, and that's the Nicholson Centre. If I could hand over to Michael, please. He needs, if you could just give him a minute to get his seat with a camera. Are you ready, Michael? Almost.
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When you're ready, you can share your screen. Thanks.
Sorry. Yeah.
Michael, you've got more. You need to turn your notifications off. Technical.
Technical issues here.
Apologies for the delay, we've just got a slight technical issue.
Good evening, members. We're back with the application, the hybrid application for the Nicholson Quarter. Basically, the recommendation is to grant permission subject to the completion of a satisfactory Section 106 agreement, the conditions listed in Section 14 of the committee report, the update sheet that was issued 2 weeks ago, and the addendum sheet issued yesterday lunchtime. And the second one is such amendments as considered appropriate to ensure the acceptable implementation of the development. So on that, there's an addendum to the update sheet available with this PowerPoint presentation. On that, on the update sheet, members, this was deferred for 3 reasons. Basically, car parking capacity, retail floor space figures, and fire strategy. So the applicant submitted the information on that, on car parking, retail floor space, and fire strategy. We went out for consultation for 21 days on that. Now, during that time, the substantive objection from Eco Action was withdrawn. They came back on the 12th of November with a comment of support. And since then, we've also received 3 withdrawals of objections from other members of Eco Action and support. We've also received 8 letters of support from local businesses and residents saying this application should be approved in a timely manner by this committee. And also, we've had basically a commercial company in London want to move into this, saying the same thing. So we've got 9 in support. So basically, we're looking now at support. That's changed considerably from the application committee report on the 25th of November. Also on that, there's been a joint letter submitted by Eco Action and Arelli in support of this application in terms of sustainability, setting out the sustainable credentials for this development. Also in the update sheets, the addendums, you will see a number of conditions which address members' concerns which were raised on the 25th of September from car parking management plan, provision of toilets, etc. They're all set out clearly in the update sheet. I've no intention of actually going through the update sheets, but they're all available online and to all the members here. So the 3 issues again were car parking capacity. That was to focus on only the closest town centre car parks, the number of spaces available and usage. Retail floor space figures. These were areas, the split between front and the back of house, the number of retail units, and the amount of retail frontage in both the existing and proposed scenarios. And the third was a fire strategy, details regarding the escape strategy for all residential occupants. That's all we're here tonight to discuss, those 3 issues which were deferred from the committee meeting on the 25th of September. So the first one, deferral reason 1, car parking capacity. As part of the planning application, the applicant agreed a parking survey scope for the assessment with the Borough Council officers. The original scope of the assessment identified a total of 3,210 car parking spaces within the surrounding car parks. Following the deferral, the applicant has reduced the number of car parks subject to assessment. This reduction in the number of car parks considered as part of the assessment equates to a total of 2,812 parking spaces within the surrounding car parks. In having regard to this reduced total car parking capacity figure, there remains a significant town centre car parking availability on both weekdays and weekends in central Maidenhead. There are 1,632 car parking spaces available as a minimum during the peak times of usage in the current scenario. There are 1,476 car parking spaces available as a minimum during peak times of usage in the future scenario. Over 55% of overall town centre car parking capacity is available during peak times of usage on both weekdays and weekends in the current and the future scenarios. It's therefore considered that there is a significant car parking availability in the town centre across a range of options. And here you've got a plan of basically the car parking. So you've got the blue, the existing and future provision. Orange is the, bear with me, is the existing provision but not future provision. And the third is the future provision in the Nicholson Quarter multi-storey car park. So there you can see quite clearly where they are, from West Street, Hines Meadow, Broadway, down to Stafferton Way and Vickers Way. Also quite clearly with the capacity there as well. Bear with me. And on that, members, we can see quite clearly in each of those spaces for the Maidenhead car parks, the orange bracket, the blue bracket, and the green. We're looking at the spaces available, the existing, we're looking at 1,632. In the future, that goes up to, well, that's 1,476 spaces available. And that's the weekday average. In the weekend average, we're looking at spaces available 1,921, future spaces available 1,765. We've also, as I said before, we're actually looking at, we've listened to you, and we've come forward with a car parking management plan, an allocation plan, which will also cover issues in terms of car parking provision. The next issue is the retail floor space figures. The shopping patterns across the UK have changed significantly over the last 15 to 20 years. This has been further exacerbated by the rise of online retailing. As a result, national retailers require fewer and smaller physical stores, which resulted in town centres having too much retail floor space. The existing shopping centre is inward-looking and turns its back on the surrounding streets, creating dead frontages and presenting a bleak street set into the wider town centre. Currently, the centre closes between 6 p.m. and 8 a.m., resulting in 4 acres of the town centre being inactive and inaccessible. And on the right, you'll see images throughout this of the Nicholson Quarter as built out. The size and configuration of the units in a shopping centre no longer meet modern retail requirements, with deep units and large areas of redundant, dark storage areas. Moreover, the shopping centre has a high operating cost that's economically unsustainable into the future. The Nicholson Quarter is Maidenhead's opportunity to be reimagined and returned to its historic mixed-use character with increased active frontages and a vibrant offer. And you've all seen Robin's letter of support for this, how economically vibrant and positive this would be for the town centre of Maidenhead into the future. The vision has been driven by extensive consultation with residents, businesses, and other stakeholders, with over 1,500 respondents. The majority of those come out positively in favour of this development. The ground floor mix and range of shops, restaurants, cafes, and workspaces have been guided by the consultation and curated through extensive discussions with existing local and national operators and the Maidenhead Town Centre Manager, Robin, an Economic Growth Officer, to ensure that it is market-facing. The Nicholson Quarter would provide the flexibility required by local and independent operators as well as accommodating larger national operators. These operators would combine to create the retail and leisure experience that the consultation respondents have called for, whilst also complementing the existing town centre offer in Maidenhead. As a new retail offer would no longer be located within a shopping centre, operating costs would be lower, thereby supporting retailers for the long term. The applicant is ready to accommodate existing retailers into the future scheme. The proposals provide 3,946 metres squared of retail sales area across approximately 55 shops. We're losing 5 units. Robin supports that. Robin's happy with that. We are too. Supplemented by 641 metres squared of active ground floor cafe, leisure and workspaces that form part of the residence amenity and are likely to be open to the public, totaling 4,587 square metres. The existing shopping centre currently provides an equivalent retail sales area of approximately 12,049 square metres across 60 shops. The proposals provide 948 metres of active frontages compared to the 726 metres within the shopping centre today, which ensure new streets are aligned with activity, drawing pedestrians through the town centre. However, a high proportion of the proposed new retail floor space is comprised of the front of house Zone A space for the first 6.1 metres of the retail unit, when you actually look into the store. That is most important to customers wishing to browse and make purchases. When comparing existing and proposed Zone A retail floor space figures, the proposals result in a reduction of only 361 metres squared, or approximately 11%. This does not factor in additionally proposed publicly accessible amenity floor space, which would reduce this number further. I know you've got the figures here in front of us, the existing and proposed retail floor space figures. We've got the retail unit count at the top. We've got 60 existing, 55 proposed. But bearing in mind the format and layout of these units, as discussed earlier, that would make sense. We're losing 5 uneconomic units. In terms of space, we've got prime zone A. We're going from 3,366 to 3,005. We've got additional ground floor space of 641. That's front of house amenity, creation of 641 metres. We've got other figures too, going all the way down to combined retail and amenity frontages, going from 726 up to 948. So you basically see modern, attractive retail units fit for purpose. The proposals provide an increased quantum of active retail frontages over the existing strategically positioned along key desire lines and clustered around new open spaces, including Moffat Square and Nicholas Winton Square. However, a high proportion of the proposed new retail floor space is comprised of the front of house Zone A space that's most important to customers wishing to browse and make purchases. Therefore, when comparing existing and proposed Zone A retail floor space figures, the proposals result in a reduction of only 361 square metres, or approximately 11%. This does not factor in additionally proposed accessible space. Additionally, the proposals provide an increased quantum of active retail frontages over the existing strategically positioned along key desire lines. We've got the 55 retail units. Given the existing level of vacancy, the town centre manager advises this does not pose an issue to the vitality and longevity of the town centre. This combination of market-facing retail spaces, increased and improved frontages, blended amenity and retail provision, and a comparable number of retail units to the existing is considered to deliver a significantly improved shopping experience overall. Now, these two images show you the increased permeability and accessibility that this proposal creates. This is called a nollie plan. These are nollie plans. So on the left, you've got the existing shopping centre with the high street at the top. Basically, lack of impact, one block almost. On the right, you've got the proposed. You've got the creation of new squares, new public open spaces, but you've got movement, you've got access. throughout the square, throughout Nicholson Quarter. So bringing people in, moving across the site, so far greater permeability and accessibility than existing. This one's interesting. This is a visual comparison for retail frontages. So on the left, you've got the existing active retail frontage at the top left, and bottom left is existing Zone A retail. You see the red there and the limited amount of it. On the right, you see the proposed and a far more increased area of red. The blue is a residential amenity on looking onto the site as well, and that's increased. So you're basically looking at the quantum of red, the quantum of retail actually increases on that. So the retail conclusions, in summary, the existing shopping centre is demonstrably no longer capable of meeting current retail demands now or in the future. The proposals deliver a similar amount of Zone A retail floor space and overall number of retail units as the existing. The proposals also deliver 222 metres more active combined retail and amenity frontage than the existing shopping centre. The retail strategy has been informed through active engagement with local retailers, the council's town centre management team, as well as public consultation to ensure that the future retail environment matches market requirements. Moving on, fire strategy. And on that, I want to raise an issue here. We were asked, had we consulted the Health and Safety Executive? Yes, we had, and we reconsulted them. And they've submitted their comments 2 days ago, and those comments were no objection to this proposed development. So the fire strategy is this. The current planning design stage has taken fire safety matters into account and has informed the overall fire and access strategy. This will be developed further into detailed design should planning permission be granted. As residential buildings in zones 1, 5 and 6 of the application exceed 18 metres in height, the Building Control Authority would be the building safety regulator, who's governed by the Health and Safety Executive. Because of this, the design would therefore need to pass through the gateway process and secure the necessary approval. This proposal requires consultation with the fire services and means the development cannot be built unless the fire services provide their approval. The planning application follows the post-Grenfell regulations set out in the Building Safety Act, such as dual staircases, external wall materials that do not support fire spread, compartmentation or compartmentalization of walls and structures, and active fire safety systems, such as emergency power, as well as adopting the Golden Thread protocols. The application was accompanied by a fire statement prepared by an accredited fire consultant and sets out how each of the residential buildings will achieve full compliance with the legislation. This image here sets out where we're up to now. This is the gateway process, the fire strategy. On the left, you've got the planning design with the concept design, which outlines the strategies for dealing with fire accessibility and other building regulations, compliance issues. We are now at the next stage, Gateway 1. This is the current stage, planning approval. We're here now, and we've consulted the Health and Safety Executive, no objection, they're satisfied. The submission of the planning information, including Gateway 1 statement for higher risk buildings provided with the application, setting out key strategy information. Then there's a design access statement, sets out the key accessibility issues for the application. Then there are other stages beyond this, which we don't get into now. This is later. So that's where we are now. This is what you're being asked to look at. But there's the detailed design that follows this. Then there's the Gateway 2. Then there's the construction. Then there's Gateway 3. And then there's the occupation. Now, occupation is no occupation without building safety regulator approval. Register building with the building safety regulator prior to occupation. That's several gateway steps later. So in our Gateway 1, we have approval from the Health and Safety Executive. Gateway 1, they're satisfied. An evacuation alert system would be installed within each dwelling, allowing the fire safe service to evacuate specific sections of the building simultaneously as deemed necessary. Disabled refugees will be provided within the firefighting lobbies and evacuation lift lobbies at each floor, provided with emergency voice communication systems. A plan has been submitted with a fire strategy illustrating the fire services site plan with resident evacuation points. In summary, the submitted fire strategy contains the required level of detail for this stage. It will be subject to further design development as part of the Gateway 2 approval process. It complies with the Post-Grenfell Building Safety Act, for example, dual staircases, external wall materials that do not support fire spread, compartmentation of walls and structures, and active fire safety systems such as emergency power. The fire services are consulted as part of the Gateway 2 approval process, which ensures a fire strategy for the future development is acceptable. Also, the applicant submitted this plan, which you'll all have seen, the fire services site plan, which shows basically different access and escape routes throughout the site, throughout the five zones or 6 zones in the development of basically throughout the site. With the permeability they're proposing, again, arguably, it's a much better, safer scheme than the existing building on that site. Now on that, so we've looked at the 3 issues. This application was deferred at committee on the 5th of September. We've gone through all of those in fine detail. The next issue is a Section 106, Agreement and Infrastructure. We need to bear this in mind in moving forward. Under Regulation 122 of the Community Infrastructure Levy Regulations 2010. The first is what we're asking necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms? Is it B, directly related to development? Is it C, fairly and reasonably related in scale and kinds of development? So we're asking the members to bear that in mind in the discussion later. We're looking at a number of conditions. Those conditions are set out in the addendum to the update sheet. Plus there's one you'll recall from the update sheet, which is for the car park management plan. But these are additional ones. Concerns were raised by the members at the previous meeting, so we've set these out in full here. This is the provision of public toilets. Prior to above ground works, details for public toilets, disabled facilities, and baby changing facilities, together with a schedule of maintenance, shall be submitted to the local planning authority for approval in writing. The approved public toilets, disabled facilities, and baby changing facilities shall be provided for use prior to the first occupation of the Nicholson Quarter and be retained and maintained thereafter for the lifetime of the development. And the reason for this is to ensure a satisfactory environment for the future occupants, visitors, and shoppers frequenting the development in accordance with the National Planning Policy Framework. The next one, we are conscious and concerned that we've received comments from the occupants of the NHS in Nicholson House. And we think we're duty-bound as officers to recommend that a construction environmental management plan condition is imposed if planning permission is granted. And that is that no development, including any demolition or site clearance, shall take place until a construction and demolition environmental management plan, known as a SEMP, has been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. The SEMP shall include, as a minimum, 1, the routing of construction and demolition traffic, including directional signage and appropriate traffic management measures. 2, details of the details of the parking of vehicles of site operatives and visitors. 3, areas for loading and unloading of plant and materials. 4, areas for the storage of plant and materials used in constructing the development. 5, the location of any temporary porta cabins and welfare buildings for site operatives. 6, the details of any security hoarding. 7, the details of any external lighting of the site. 8, details of the method of piling for foundations. 9, the measures to control the emission of dust, dirt, noise, and odor during demolition and construction. 10, measures to control surface water runoff during demolition and construction. This goes on. 11, construction and demolition working hours and hours during which delivery vehicles or vehicles taking materials away are allowed to enter or leave the site. 12 is details of wheel washing facilities during both demolition and construction phases. And 13, areas for the turning of construction and demolition vehicles such that the largest anticipated vehicle can turn and leave the site in a forward gear. The approved SEMP shall be adhered to throughout the demolition and construction period. And the reason for this, in the interest of the amenities of the surrounding occupiers during the construction of the development, in accordance with the policies IF2 and QP3 of the Borough Local Plan. On that, we've got 2 additional conditions on the events programme. We've listened to the town centre manager. We want the vitality and the vibrancy of Maidenhead in the forefront of our minds. So in terms of the full application, looking at no development in relation to zones 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6 shall take place until an events programme as part of the town centre improvements has been submitted to and been approved in writing by the local planning authority. The events programme, as approved, shall be implemented and updated annually as part of the town centre improvements. The reason for this is to ensure a form of development that maintains and contributes positively to the character and appearance of the area, to ensure the vitality and viability of Maidenhead Town Centre. Now, because it's a hybrid application with part full, part outline, we've almost got an identical condition here that relates to zone 3. So basically it's the same again, but for zone 3 for the outline. So moving on from that, to actually the benefits and harms, the table. So on the left, you've got the benefits, and on the right, you've got the harms. And it's easier to look on the big screen for this. So on the left, you've got the regeneration of a previously developed brownfield site in Maidenhead Town Centre. You've got the provision of 856 new apartments, comprising 755 apartments and 101 senior independent living apartments, assisting in meeting the council's housing targets. Contribute significantly to the council's 5-year housing land supply. Proposed amendment would provide substantial business accommodation and provide a range of employment opportunities both during and following construction, including provision of 11,350 square metres of flexible office space. The creation of up to 1,174 new full-time jobs across a variety of uses, in addition to considerable employment creation of approximately 400 jobs per year during the demolition and construction phases. Significant investment in Maidenhead of approximately £500 million. Proposed employees and new residents are expected to contribute significantly to local economy, with each resident expected to conservatively spend on average £6,320 per year, a total of £8.2 million per year. The workers, the employees, are expected to spend £3.2 million per year. We'll also see the replacement of an existing shopping centre with over 55 new retail and flexible commercial units. The provision of 0.668 or 1.65 acres of open space, including the 2 new squares, so Nicholas Winton Square and Moffat Square. Proposed development would achieve 800% of biodiversity net gain, not 10%, but 800%. The total site-wide carbon saving of 66% compared to the Part L 2021 baseline. In terms of harms, there are merely 2. They are, the first one is the effect of the proposal on the character of the conservation area and impact upon listed buildings. The overall harm is considered to be less than substantial. And you recall from the committee report on the 25th of September, plans are duty bound to balance that less than substantial harm against the benefits. And the benefits are substantial. And the final one is the reduction of daylighting to the rear of number 95 High Street, and reduction in the sunlight to the rear of numbers 20, 22, 36, 38, and 40 Queen Street are considered to be of limited weight, given the small scale of the overall impact. And the next slide just goes back to remind us all the recommendation, and that is to grant planning permission, subject to the completion of a satisfactory Section 106 agreement. The conditions listed in Section 14 of the committee report presented to you on the 25th of September, plus the update sheet for this accompanying this committee and the addendum sheet issued yesterday. But also, most important, I think, is the recommendation that such amendments that are considered appropriate to ensure the acceptable implementation of the development. So if members wish to amend or add to any of the conditions you've just been presented, it's in duty but under delegated authority to do that. So that's the second recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Michael. Before I open up to the floor, we've got 4 speakers on this agenda item. Can I firstly call up Andrew Hill, please? When you're ready, you've got 3 minutes with a 1-minute warning.
Thank you. Aurelia's environment statement openly identifies a, quote, significant adverse harm to local GP surgeries, but the officer's report does not tell you this. Aurelia state that Maidenhead is already oversubscribed by 592 patients, and their health impact assessment warns you, quote, given the existing overcapacity of GP facilities in the area, it is likely that 1,900 new residents will put increased pressure on existing and already stretched NHS services. This can increase wait lists for appointments, which in turn could prevent treatment, exacerbate existing conditions, or cause complications or new conditions, end quote. I couldn't have written a better significant adverse harm statement if I tried. But the report says, don't worry, because SIL and Section 106 might pay for the GPs. The report's author had no idea that SIL in Maidenhead Town Centre is 0. Aurelia also tell you that this scheme will deliver 0 affordable homes and at best return only 1.5% profit. It's been said to be economically unviable by both your expert and theirs, and so paying for doctors forever under Section 106 can only push this scheme further into bankruptcy, risking taking Maidenhead lives with them. Today's Shanley objection was not mentioned by the officer in his partisan list. 100 car parking spaces is obviously not enough and is based on the absurd inclusion of out-of-town Staffordton and Vickersway data. When I spoke at the last meeting, I warned you that the blight caused by Aurelia and EcoAction's next decade of dust and demolition would lead to the loss of Marks and Spencer's from this high street. Just in case Boots do want to stay here, Aurelia has now sent early notice letters to multiple Nicholson businesses. So how many jobs will be lost? Mr. Waite tells you at paragraph 10.79 that the moment you vote yes tonight, it will result in the loss of a minimum of 249 Maidenhead jobs. And that's called the best case scenario. That would be bad enough, but the officer's report has not published the equally important reasonable worst case scenario figures. Aurelia themselves state, under this scenario, the quantity of existing employment which would be lost on site results in an overall loss of 524 jobs. In Orwellian language, the planning team recommends that councillors tonight take the, quote, opportunity to hand out between 249 and 524 P45s in time for Christmas. This is the biggest adverse harm in Maidenhead's entire history. Vote no, save 524 jobs. I'd say it's a no-brainer, but Aurelia have told you you won't even get the GP appointment in time for the brain surgery. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. Can I call up my next speaker, please, Richard Gross, who wishes to remain off camera. Richard, if you want to go to that desk there. Thank you. And when you're ready, you've got 3 minutes with a 1-minute warning. Thank
Members of the Planning Committee, my name is Richard Gross. I'm here to object to the planning application, Nicholson's Quarter. In particular, concerning the car parking proposals for Nicholson's Quarter development.
I asked you to reject this application, not on the technicality, but because it is fundamentally ignores the reality of Maidenhead's parking decline and the pressure this places on our town. The current proposal fails the town centre, and I'd ask that the application is once again deferred pending further investigation into the actual available parking stock. Between 2014 and 2024, Maidenhead permanently lost 1,327 public parking spaces due to demolitions. These car parks involved were Hines Meadow, a section of it, Town Hall Station Approach, Magnet Leisure Centre, and finally Broadway Nicholsons MSCP. While the 503 spaces of Victor's Way were built in 2021, accounting for all permanent gains and losses since 2014, this leaves us with a net loss of 820 public spaces since 2014. The application before you today seeks to replace the former 734 space multi-storey with a facility that offers only 100 spaces for permanent public use. The rest are for residents and stakeholders. I implore you to ask and investigate how the remaining spaces will be spread between the stakeholders and the residents. This is unacceptable loss of 634 spaces. The difference between the 734 and the 100 spaces on a single critical town centre site. Furthermore, the application forces us to rely on the continued operation of Grove Road, 82 spaces, and West Street, 59 spaces. These sites are earmarked for future development in your own council plans. They are not permanent or guaranteed capacity.
1 minute remaining.
We also know that the council rationalised in its own property portfolio. The Welbeck House site was demolished in 2024, and the council owns the freehold with plans for sale. The staff parking associated with council operations will no doubt be absorbed into existing public car parks such as Hines Meadow or Victor's Way. This is a critical point. In 2017, the council actively worked to relocate staff parking out of Hines Meadow to free up space for general public. Now, due to the loss of sites like the Town Hall and the Welbeck House area, the proposals will probably reverse the decision to move back in, further reducing genuine car parking stability around the stated 1,280 total. The reduction in spaces is occurring against a backdrop of increasing demand for personal vehicle use, a trend that is well documented nationally and locally through official channels. RB acknowledged this in itself in 2016 Cabinet meeting report that a constant theme in increasing pressure on parking and public parking.
Richard, your time is up, I'm afraid.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you. Can I call up the next speaker, please? Hesham Fowler? Hopefully I said your name okay. Thank you. If you go to the one, the usual one. Thank you. And when you're ready, you've got 3 minutes with 1 minute warning. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I made some just 2 points here. I haven't got anything in details, but my name is Hisham Fouda. I'm a founder of Presto Italian Street Food, one of the independent business here in Maidenhead. A little bit about myself. I moved to Maidenhead 10 years ago. Prior to that, I was in Bracknell. Bracknell was a dying town centre. I went over there and didn't really like it. Felt it was an absolutely dying town centre. Made the decision to move to Maidenhead. We had a better shopping centre at the time with more facilities inside. We had H&M next and the rest of the good shopping there to provide me for my family as a kind of good town centre. 10 years on, it's completely the opposite. Bracknell become an amazing, vibrant, lovely town with an amazing shopping centre, mix between basically retail, food, and it become an amazing destination. Now I visit Bracknell to go over there for my shopping. So I think we've got an amazing opportunity here in our hand today from a local resident here and also a business owner at the same time in Maidenhead to see an amazing opportunity here with this guy's coming over saying there's a 500 million coming to be reinvested here in Maidenhead. I think that doesn't happen everywhere. Also an amazing opportunity by having an amazing footfall coming to the area, which is benefit my business and my neighbour as well in the area. I think that would be very beneficial. Equally important, I think by having the area being developed will also stop the antisocial behavior is happening around the area. And I think we've seen it ourselves. So by having all of these corner streets becoming an amazing, vibrant place, with having a small shop, small business, 55 shops coming to an area, it will be an opportunity hard to be missed. So all I'm asking for here, there is definitely some concerns, and I can see the concerns, but that could be addressed. So the parking, I agree. And I think there is
1 minute remaining.
In my opinion, we've got an amazing unutilized car park right behind where we are, which is we based in the waterside quarter, the Heinz Meadow. It's 1,200 spaces there, potentially could be improved, signage, cleaning, it would be better. So that could fix the car parking issue. I think the gentleman earlier highlighted the risk about the GP, and I think is a valid point, need to be looked at. That's also my opinion. So yeah, the benefit is it's a lot. It's more business coming to an area, footfall coming to an area. 11 million pounds highlighted earlier today, saying that will be coming to the economy here of Maidenhead. I think there is a lot of pros and cons need to be considered. And thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I call up the final speaker on this one, Andrew Ingram, please? When you're ready, you've got 3 minutes and a 1 minute warning.
Thank you. I should say tonight, I am just speaking on my own behalf, not as co-chair of Maidenhead Neighbourhood Forum. We moved to Maidenhead in 2011, and since that time, the High Street, including Nicholsons, has become increasingly tired and tatty. But when I first saw these proposals some years ago, my initial thought was, why do they have to make it so tall? Why can't they just refurbish the shopping centre? And then I discovered the borough's housing targets. Somewhere we have to find room for 14,000 new homes by 2033. And here in Maidenhead, if you can't build outwards, and we can't because we're surrounded by a lot of greenbelt and crown land, then you have to build upwards. Some people seem to think this development will stand out like a sore thumb. But my feeling is, partly because of the way it's been stepped back, is if you're in the high street, you won't see the height, you'll see the high street. That's how we tend to operate as people in the town. We focus at street level. I wrote to the paper about the lack of public toilets earlier this year, and I'm glad to see these are now included as a planning condition. Some people are worried about retail. I think we need to look forward. We just don't shop like we used to. The media are now talking about post-retail towns. M&S is closing, not because they don't like Maidenhead, because not enough of us are shopping there. New things, more experiential things are going to take the place of traditional shops, and the market will decide what's successful. The market has changed. With all the recent new homes in town, we're going to have something like 5,000 new town centre residents, and most are not going to be in their 60s like me. Some have already arrived, and you can see them. They're much younger, they carry large water bottles, and they don't wear socks. That's 5,000 people who've got money to spend, and that's who will be driving trade in the town centre. In the last 2 months, I was shocked to learn how underused the current car parks
1 minute
are.
remaining.
I'm sorry there won't be more parking on site for visitors, but I still think it can work. Can you walk from the new development from Heinz Meadow car park? Yes, it's about 7 minutes. But I suggest that Heinz Meadow needs to be made less awful as a priority. So I feel the plan may not be 100% perfect, but it can work, and it's infinitely better than the alternative, which is for Nicholsons to be shuttered for 5 years until the next bright idea comes along. As we've seen down by the waterway, redevelopment can bring great opportunities for people like Hesham. It's buzzing down there, and I recommend acceptance.
Thank you, Andrew. So I'm ready to open this up to the floor now. Firstly, can we start with any questions around what you've heard so far? Councillor Baskerville, please.
Yes, I just want clarification on one of the figures. It's quite important. It mentioned about 60 units that we currently have, shopping units, and the new plan is for 55. Is that correct?
Yes, 55, yes.
And of that figure of 60, existing figure of 60, how many of that units included are currently empty and boarded up units?
So the way that the vacancy rates are looked at, they look across at a town centre basis. I mean, we all know around the table that the Nicholsons shopping centre is fairly closed up in its current state. But the one thing I will point you towards is the town centre manager's response, which kind of summarises the impact of, I think, the question you're asking for. And what she's basically said to us is the loss of 5 units wouldn't pose a problem to the vitality of the town centre. So yes, there would be a loss, but you've got to look at this scheme as quality versus quantity. Because when a new scheme comes to an area, it promotes, attractive new occupiers to come to the area. So it's a factor of many. But in terms of a purely net loss basis, the advice that we've had from the town centre manager is that would not impact on the vitality of the town centre and is acceptable.
And just finally on that point, the 55 figure, how confident are the developers and the town centre manager of reaching that figure, 55?
Well, that's what's shown on the plans, so that's what should be built out.
Thank you, Councillor Baskerville. Councillor Taylor, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions, if that's okay. But firstly, can I just say that the new conditions for the construction environmental management plan and the events programme that the officers have put together have been very well done and very well worded. So I'd just like to say thank you for that. I've got a couple of questions on my main bugbear with this is that previously on applications, we've been told that sustainable locations don't need parking. And we're told that quite frequently when we're considering town centre applications. So one of my question is, if this site has been identified as a sustainable location, why are parking places being allocated to residents? Is it because some of the flats are of a larger size? And if it doesn't need to be done, could these spaces not be opened up for shoppers? Because out of 100 spaces with 21 blue badge, unless my maths is worse than I think, is 79, which isn't great. I mean, I specifically asked at the deferral for information on any works that were going to happen to Hines Meadow and Staffton, because I know works need to be done. I think Councillor Hill said at full council on Tuesday that there was some work to be done on, I think it was Staffton Way and Hines Meadow, because if we're going to rely on these car parks, and that's part of this application, and that's part of the argument for parking, surely we need to know that's going to be the case. We don't need to be second guessing that. So that's a question on that one. I'd also like to just ask if the car park allocation and management plan, can officers give assurances that that condition will only be signed off once that's available and agreed? And also just a query on the condition with the public toilets being in a condition. I didn't think that's what wing conditions are for. I thought that would have to be something that would be put into the design. I didn't think, simply having a condition saying, yes, we're going to put public toilets in would be enough, because potentially they can come back and say, we've not got the money, we've not got the space, and, to have that condition removed. So they're my questions.
Can I bring you in on that? James here?
I've got a list here on my page. So if I forget one, do pick me up. I'm sure you will do. Just going back from last to the first. So in terms of toilet provision, there's a trigger point on there which requires the applicants to submit details. If they don't submit that, then the trigger point basically kicks in and it stops them from doing development at a certain point. If they were to come back in to remove that, they'd have to vary that condition. That would come through as a planning application to the council. It would be in the public domain. You would all have the benefit of seeing that as well, you would do. So there'd be no sort of cloaks and daggers approach towards that. It's fully in the public domain for everyone to assess. But like I say, the condition is required to be, it takes place at their trigger point. So that's when it would basically come forward. In terms of the car park management plan, that would go through the usual conditions process. So they would submit the details to us. We would normally liaise with the local highways authority to get their sign off on it. And then obviously it would be determined one way or the other, depending on the acceptability of the information. So that's a very standard process to go through. In terms of the Hines Meadow car park, I guess the works, I think that you're referring to. I mean, the officer's view on that is it doesn't require additional works to it. And we know that there is capacity in there, which obviously the applicants are relying upon at the same time, but there are pre-existing issues in there. I don't want to guide you members in a certain way, but I think I understand the point you're getting to. I think I'll leave it to the floor to discuss it in further detail throughout the course of tonight, if that's okay.
Did you want to come back, Councillor Taylor? Are you okay for me to move on to Councillor Gosling? Thank you.
My concern is that there have been no additional parking spaces provided since our last meeting, which was one of the things that we deferred the meeting for. And we were asking, I believe we did, didn't we? No? Four more parking within the building. Yes, we did, but nothing's been provided. Having said that, I'm very pleased to hear that we've got extra toilets. And are extra toilets in each of the blocks so that if you're walking through, because it's like a open mall with cafes on either side. So it's very distressing if you own a cafe that somebody keeps using your toilet. So how many toilets are actually going to be provided?
Yeah, so just in terms of the reasons for deferral, I think from, again, I wasn't at the committee, so forgive me if I'm quoting this wrong. You will know better than I do, as well Adrian, who was at the committee last time. But I think the deferral reason was to basically give further consideration to the availability of spaces in the existing car parks and queries over car parks that were being shut down, not necessarily an aspiration to secure more car parking. I think, Adrian, if you nod your head.
Yes, that's correct. The deferral reason related to members wanting further information about the adequacy of the parking proposals in the town centre. It wasn't a deferral reason seeking for the applicant to amend plans and add in extra car parking. It was more information so members could better understand the application and the impacts.
And then just turning to your point two regarding toilets, I mean, the draft condition that's set out in your committee update sheet looks at public toilet, well, it requires public toilets, disabled facilities and baby changing facilities. So that would give you a quantum of development in terms of toilet provision around that. And again, it would be for the applicants to come to us with the details of those and for us to agree that as a discharge of condition, basically. And put quite frankly, it's a very common sense assessment. You wouldn't want one toilet, for example, to serve a scheme of this size. So in that respect, you need to obviously trust the officers to do the right thing at discharge of condition stage.
Okay, thank you.
Just going back to Councillor Gosling's request, we did do a focus on the closest town centre car parks. That's what was requested. So I'm quite surprised that Vickers Way and Staffordton are still in there, seeing as it's not considered core, according to the BLP, which stops at the railway line. So that's what was brought up last meeting as well. And also on toilets, would any retail units be affected by the provision of those? Because if we're down to 55 and we're going to further reductions, let's say that took up 300 square metres, we're down another 10% on retail again. So if you could clarify that for me before I go on to the next
Councillor's just left the room. Councillor Baskerville. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, if we could just pause until Councillor Baskerville returns, if that's okay. I think since we're pausing anyway, if anyone else needs a comfort break very quickly, you may as well take the opportunity right now anyway. Yeah. Yes, sorry for that quick break. If any other member needs a comfort break, can they indicate? Because it does risk that we can't vote. So I got up to my point about core centre car parks. Toilets, thank you.
A rather apt topic, given the nature of the break. So I'll turn to the toilets provision and whether it would in fact impact upon the retail kind of provision on the side. I mean, essentially what would happen is you can get freestanding toilet units in development sites, which yes, would need the benefit of planning permission, but it's not uncommon on these larger schemes when applicants come to discharge conditions to have a necessity to tweak permissions in a very minor way. So again, that would all be in the public domain because it would come through either via a discharge of condition application or a variation to the permission. So all within the public domain. So there's no basis from what we're proposing as a condition that would implicate upon the retail provision that's been proposed and assessed. So we're absolutely comfortable on that point as officers. In terms of the point about the Vickers Way and Staffordton Road car parking, I mean, we've included it for completeness because when we looked at the car parking survey area, when we were agreeing with the local highways authority, they were deemed as these are the car parks that you would use reasonably in their view. I'll caveat that with their view, and that's the advice that we've taken. Now, if you take out those two car parks from the overall provision, the question really is does that have a material impact upon the parking provision, availability of spaces, etc.? And using very broad maths, you're still going to get to an excess of spaces of over about 1,000 spaces in a worst case scenario. So there's still what we would consider to be sufficient headroom, even by discounting those car parks. Now that's making an assumption that every person that's going to come to use the Nicholsons Quarter development is going to park in one car park. And the nature of car parking is, as we all know, you might want to park in a different location because you might have a different route through the town centre. So we've kind of considered both scenarios about how people may practically use the area, but also the worst case scenario in terms of the very minimum amount of parking provision available. And in both scenarios, that still demonstrates that there's sufficient headway and capacity in terms of available spaces.
I find that surprising, but anyway. Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarity, we're still in the questions for officers phase, aren't we? We're not in the debate phase. Thank you, yeah. So just sort of a brief comment on the retail numbers that we deferred for. I think, it's a lot easier now to work out what's going on in those figures. So thank you to officers for the clarity on that. I mean, basically the back of house space is going down and the frontage is going up. And, there's pros and cons there, obviously, but I think we've got the information we need now to make a decision, which I appreciate. Thank you. Earlier I expressed concerns at the previous meeting about how the development will look. We've got condition 3 and 4. My question for officers, the details of the materials have got to be submitted and approved by the local authority. How much of a steer does that give us in terms of the look of these blocks? Just looking at the TGIs I mentioned at the previous meeting, some of them look very dark. What will the buildings really look like when they're complete is the question. I think that'll depend a lot on the materials and the finishes. So what I'm asking is, can you influence the balance through this condition?
It depends on, I guess, whether you have a concern over materials to understand how that would feed into the balance. The question I think that you've put to us as officers is, there is a condition there, we would have a broad scope of powers in terms of discharging that condition to secure a variety of materials. And that would be down to the officer's discretion to assess that in the same sense that any other application would be. So in that regard, it feeds into the balance because it's a high quality design and we can secure that through the conditions process.
Councillor Douglas, you want to come back?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just very briefly, I think that key word there, variety, is really important to me. So I'm glad you've got that on your mind already. What we don't want is everything looking the same. We don't want everything looking dark. And if the officers are telling me they're going to ensure this variety, that does reassure me to a degree. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, if that is a pertinent point for you, what I would advise for you to do as a member, and again, it's totally down to your discretion to do that, is we can tweak conditions 3 and 4 to specify a variety of materials. So it gives us a real steer and the applicants a clear steer what they would want to see when they come to do that. And it just takes away the subjectivity of, and I'll use a purely hypothetical scenario here to illustrate the point, but if they came forward with a straightforward red brick palette, that would be in accordance with the condition. Would we as officers have an ability to refuse that? That would be questionable. If it must include a variety of materials, again, then we have to secure a variety as part of that condition. So, thank you.
Thank you. Can I go to Councillor Kashmir Singh, please?
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions, and if I can have respond to any particular answers I get, if they're not sufficient. These two tall buildings that are going to be built, are they still going to be 24 stories high? And if they are, originally they were 28 stories, will they have an automatic sprinkler system? Because we don't want to have the situation of Grenfell Towers just a few years ago, because fire engines can only reach up to 8th floor. The other item is the impact on the bus service and the reduction to and from the high street during construction. And if the company Aerolit will do anything to alleviate this or pay for the costs on that. And the item 3 is the claimed 800% increase in biodiversity. Where will that be and how will that actually be achieved? We have had no project that has reached anywhere near 800%. Thank you.
So in terms of the first question about building heights, obviously post Grenfell matters, sprinkler systems. I mean, Michael's taking you through in his officer presentation about the gateway process that obviously all buildings have to go through. We've consulted with the health and safety executive, which has come back with a no objection, which means they're happy with what they got at this stage. That has to go through the gateway 2 and gateway 3 process as part of the building regulations process. Put very simply, if there was an issue in one of those subsequent processes, the applicants can't build. It's really that simple and straightforward, because as we all know, the severity of fire safety, the health and safety of occupants of the buildings is absolutely paramount with buildings of these natures. And that's why the HSE post the Grenfell matters have introduced that gateway process for those specific safeguards. So that would get picked up at that time. Where we're at today, in terms of the applications that have been put forward, there is no reason to suggest why it couldn't pass that process. And that's as far as the applicants need to go at this time. And it's as far as our powers as a local planning authority allow us to go. In terms of the bus services during constructions, I mean, bus services are always down to the private operators to mandate and to dictate. So you can't really force a bus service operator to do something that they don't commercially want to do. But we are satisfied as officers that there are sufficient roads, sufficient stops in the nearby area, so that basically the provisions wouldn't be affected. And it goes without saying that bus service providers don't want to stop routes which are working commercially and viably anyway throughout those times. So yes, there will be an interim change, but I wouldn't foresee it being an impact. And if that impact was there, they'd be stopping their services anyway, to be perfectly frank. And then finally, on the 800% B&G achievement, the truth with this is why it's so high in this scheme is because as existing, the site is completely concreted over. So you've got a very, 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 I can't see very enough times, very, very poor baseline. So basically any enhancement will give you a very, very high value. So in terms of the landscaping schemes that will come forward, amenity spaces, terrace spaces, et cetera, that's what contributes to that high level of biodiversity net gain. It's quite noteworthy that you've raised how high that is in the context of other applications, because that's why we as officers have given that a lot of weight in the decision-making process, because you don't see it that high normally. I think I'm just going to pass over to Adrian, that's right, Chair.
Yes, I think James provided a very comprehensive answer there on fire safety, but perhaps easier to just give the simple one. the fire safety document that's been to HSE is on the website and on the public access. It does include sprinklers to all the commercial and residential buildings.
Thank you. Can I go to councillor Taylor, please?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I forgot a question. I'm so sorry. In the report, 10.3312 to 10.314 raises concerns about the sewage treatment works needing upgrading in order to service this development. Now, is that's obviously quite a problem, and there's obviously it mentioned in the report that, you know, it's got to go back and forth and et cetera, but to have a development going ahead, knowing that there's an issue and not knowing when that upgrade is going to take place, is that something we can condition? Because we have previously put conditions on saying nothing above slab level until confirmation's been given that, you know, servicing can be done. But that's a real fear for me. As is this table. Bear with.
We just pause for a second while we sort. Sorry about that. I think we have technical issues and table issues tonight. So, Councillor Taylor, did you finish your question about the sewage works?
Oh God,
Or
I daren't
did you have
touch it.
more
I'm
to
not
add?
touching it. Meeting and a show, who knew? Yeah, no, I'm just really concerned about that, and I want to know if we can condition it or like in similar ways that we have previously, because that's quite a concern. And if we're stuck in a situation where obviously, you know, it's between two other parties to do the upgrade, potentially we could have either flats sitting there empty for, you know, until it's sorted, or worst case scenario, issues with the actual development. So if I could have an answer, that'd be great. And I promise I'm not touching this table.
Yeah, so please direct down the question as always. So conditions 24 and 25 talk about wastewater drainage, and in effect, just to read it verbatim for everyone's benefit, it does say no development within zones 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. That's condition 24. And then zone 3 is condition 25, shall be commenced until a scheme for the required upgrade to the existing sewage system have been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. And, sorry?
There's the other question about slab level. If we've put conditions in the past for developments.
Oh, so sorry, you say in terms of the trigger point for slab level, is that? Well, no development comes before slab level. So basically you'd have greater comfort earlier on in the process.
Wording.
No development,
Okay.
yeah. So even for example, piling would normally comprise a development operation pursuant to section 55 of the Act, if you've got time in your hands to read that. So yes, it's much earlier on in the process. It's to give the certainty that there will be sufficient capacity in the wastewater treatment works. Reason why that is because there's a large quantum of development coming forward. The treatment work upgrades that be required would be so substantive that you want it as far forward in the process, so it gives everyone certainty to avoid the situations that you've just described there.
Thank you. Councillor Gurj Singh, next, please.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a question that sort of, I had it in my mind, and it was raised by Speaker Andrew Hill regarding the GP surgeries. I think he made quite a good point on that. And I just wanted to ask whether it's possible to sort of look in, as part of the section 106, to have a look at the impact that this would have on the local primary care capacity. And, you know, I'm not proposing obviously have a GP condition, a GP surgery on site or anything like that, but whether we can have an informative in there that the applicant engage at an early stage with the NHS integrated ICBD integrated care board and agree some sort of a provision. Is that possible?
Yes, the NHS, the Berkshire Healthcare NHS Foundation Trust, were consulted with the application. I can't confirm whether that was specifically in terms of healthcare provision or whether it's through their asset management sort of team. But in terms of, I'll give you a bit of context, because it might help answer the question. But in terms of when you look at a new GP surgery, I'm just going to work this back for you. You'd be looking at a critical mass for most ICBs, about 30,000 net plus population. So basically anything below that threshold, or where there's a pre-existing problem that we'll be aware of, and normally speaking with schemes of this size, the NHS tend to come out of the woodwork, and that's for commercial reasons, to be perfectly honest with you. So what the point I'm trying to get to is the quantum of development you've got here, although it does seem large physically on the sides, the population yield that's coming forward would be accommodated within the existing capacities of a GP surgery. And that would be the same if for example, you or I were moving to a different area, you would register with your GP surgery. Then if there were a capacity issue in the surgery, then the surgery then obviously come to the council to say, we want to look at sites expanding, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not quite a direct correlation and link in that respect. It's done as part of their overall asset management plan and facilities rollout. So hope that roundabout answers the question.
Okay, thank you. Yes, that does. Yeah, so there is capacity there within the GP structure. Okay, and the other question I wanted to ask is regarding this Nicholson house, which is another NHS provision. I know there are some conditions here. But I just wanted to see if those conditions can be tightened up somewhat, because this, my understanding, is also sort of clinical and primary care. And whether we can have a look at some things. What I was looking at is sort of like have that, make sure that access is clear and open and safe. You know, like throughout the build, the demolition and everything, and also the, you know, the hoarding and lighting around that area is also, you know, it's appropriate, I suppose, for residents. And there's no obstruction, obviously, to the clinical access. Is that okay? You can do that, yeah.
Condition prior to, yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's very important there as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment there. Talking of NHS and just, you know, provision generally of, you know, well-being, shop mobility. I don't remember seeing that in the presentation. Can you tell us what's going on with that, ensuring where possible, you know, that, you know, between when the building's not there, that they've got some sort of provision and how that's going to look? Thank you.
I will bring in Jack Barber on this point, because I think it's quite, there's a point about basically what the local planning authority can do in terms of their local planning authority remit and powers versus what is essentially private property law between owners and occupiers. I will give a bit of context just before Jack goes through his great crescendo, should we say. But in terms of, and this is for purely context sakes, not for your feeding into a decision-making process. I just want to be really clear on that. But in terms of the displacement of shop mobility, already, who are the applicants, have committed to re-providing shop mobility in the first phase of the development. So the first phase comes forward, the intervening period is kept as short as possible. So that's what we can achieve as a local planning authority. What I am aware of, and this is purely context again, but there has been discussions with the council's town centre team and also with shop mobility themselves in order at looking about around the opportunities for where that could be replaced to, but that wouldn't become a point of local planning authority function to secure that. But I am aware that that is underway. And again, that's because it's a aspiration of the developer to, dare I say it, do the right thing. I make quite clear I'm not their PR consultant in that regard, but it's positive to hear that they are doing that by way of context. But I'll just, if I may, hand you over to Jack, just to sort of differentiate parts of law on that point. Thank you.
I'm aware that when a barrister turns up in a room full of people, sometimes they can get a bit overly complex. So just let me know if you want any clarification. But in terms of the effect in relation to shop mobility, the temporary displacement of a leaseholder from a site is ordinarily considered as a matter of private law. And so it's not considered as a relevant planning consideration for the purposes of the decision making today. Obviously, it might be something that matters for the relationship between the private leaseholder and the other landowner, but it's not a planning consideration for the purposes of today. And so a local authority, planning authority, it can conclude that a development is acceptable in land use terms and grant planning permission, even if in private terms there's some other complication that needs to be addressed elsewhere.
Thank you. Can I move next to Councillor Kashmir Singh, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to come back to James regarding the BNG. We should not take into account the so-called 800%. We could claim whatever gain, because at the moment it's a concrete jungle. So that should not be taken into material account. And as far as the retail spending going up, we already know from the development across the street here at Waterside, is most of the people living there are transient. They're living here, but they're working in London and they do not spend any money here. And the 2,000 people we're going to have as residents in these new tower blocks presumably will be the same. So my real fear, not just concern, is Maidenhead is going to become a dormitory, no extra it's not going to be an extra destination for retail. And the failure of GP services and the 1.5% profit margin, Arley is already saying that they're predicting is going to leave probably a half-constructed site and a hole in the heart of Maidenhead. That is my real fear, and that should be taken into account on this development. Thank you.
So I've got a couple of things to go through here, very different topics. In terms of the B&G 800%, I think you've put it to me, councillor, saying that it's not a consideration. Unfortunately, it is. That is the bottom line. It's a legal point and it's set out under the Environment Act. And the PPG, so the Planning and Practice Guidance, couldn't be clear on that point. So I just want to be really clear for members' benefits, what you can and should be considering. And one of those things is the B&G. So I don't want to be any kind of misapprehension over that point there. There's been two other points raised about occupants not living here. Now, none of us have a crystal ball, and I really wish we did in life because it makes things a lot easier, wouldn't it? But we don't have a crystal ball to look forward and say who is going to be living here, who's going to be buying those properties. And it's a point of complete supposition, to be honest with you. There is no evidence to suggest that. And I would certainly strongly dissuade away from members from making decisions on that basis as well. In terms of the point of the GP surgery impact, again, you haven't had any evidence to demonstrate that. I've taken you through the consultation responses with the NHS. I've sort of explained to you how that process works again. So again, there's no evidence to demonstrate that that's before you in terms of your decision-making process. And in terms of the half-constructed site throughout Maidenhead, well, the nature of building sites is they will be half-constructed throughout the process, but commercially, and this goes without saying, but developers don't sit on building sites because when they're not selling properties, they're not making money. And that is very much a driver in terms of completing a building site. As a rule of thumb, and I can give you chapter and verse this anecdotally from working previously for developers, it costs money up until the point you sell a property. So developers want to get those properties built, get them sold, move off, because that is inherently their business model. And it's those market factors that drive that kind of that build out rate process. So again, we've got no evidence, again, just to be really clear for members, to say that there will be a slow build out process or a halted build out process. But I think you can take comfort in market factors which are established over time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Come in, Adrian.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I just wanted to clarify a point in terms of what James has said. So in terms of the GP service capacity, there obviously is the applicant's environmental statement, which does have a paragraph recognising potential impact, but we've had no comments from the Primary Healthcare Trust or the NHS or any of the providers indicating that there is a requirement or a desire from them for us to seek a Section 106 contribution in order to provide additional facilities. So while there is a potential impact highlighted in one of the applicant's submissions, we've got no request for money, no apparent desire for any additional facilities from the care providers. And obviously, a Section 106 contribution or a requirement for it needs to meet all of the relevant tests. And that includes that you can't just ask for money, you have to know where you're going to spend it, have a way to spend it. And if the NHS and the PCT aren't indicating any desire to provide additional facilities or request money for that, it wouldn't be something we could try and get a contribution for or address.
Thank you. Councillor Gosling, please.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to ask the developer to considering the following scenario. If an occupant living in one of the flats becomes less able, can the developer make provision in the build to enable them to stay where they are with a few adjustments to their property? I mean, we're talking about independent living. We've had lots of information from Knight Frank as to how necessary it is for these flats to be built. I'd like to go a stage further and ask the developer if while he's building these flats, he could possibly think of this as at the development stage, it may not be that costly to put in the supported walls and wiring maybe for the pull cords, as they would do if they were putting them in for the independent living, but so that they're there if people want to stay. Because otherwise I can see these people downstairsing from their houses into a flat, and then something changes and they've got to try and move from the flat they're in to an assisted living flat. So is that something that could be put in conditions or the developer could take away tonight? Thank you.
Yeah, so the scenario you've just described there is absolutely symbiotic of why we now have policies covering what we call M42 and M43 units. And M42 is accessible and adaptable. M43 is specifically designed for wheelchair units. So M42, for example, is designed for the circumstance which you've just described, which is you move into a flat, you like living there, you want to stay there, but you need to adapt it. And I'm not a building control expert, but it basically comes with the things like if you need to put handrails in there, there's supports in there to be able to do that, to be able to retrofit it in there. And then just to sort of further give a bit more context over this point, the benefit of this scheme is the mix of houses that are coming forward. So you've both got the private open market M42 and M43 units. Then in addition to that, you've got the integrated care facility as well, which is the halfway house between living in an open market house as well to basically going into a formal care home. So there's lots of opportunities there to stay living in the area and even in the same complex if health demands dictate, but it wouldn't force a move out of the property because you've got that M42 condition on there. So that's all secured in the permission.
Councillor Gershing, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is a question for officers. I know the government, I read recently, made an announcement about this default yes of sites which are within 15 minutes walk of a railway station. I just wanted to check if would this site count in that policy announcement? I know that this application is obviously in already. And also, what sort of effect does that have on local conditions that we apply locally if obviously, if it kicks in? Thank you.
Yeah, so what you've just referred to there is MHCLG, which is the national sort of body that governs planning professions. They've gone out to consultation, I believe it's this week or last week. And the proposition, and I say it's a proposition, it's a consultation paper, is if you are within, I think it's a circa 15-minute walk from a railway station, there should be a default position of yes. Now, what's underpinning that is we've all heard nationally the push towards building more housing. That's obviously on the national agenda, the 1.5 million homes mandate that the current government have got. And one of the techniques they're looking to secure that pace of build out is by giving more of a default position for what we call highly sustainable locations. That's really what it's saying. So as you will know from this site, most of the site is within a 50-minute walk, if not all of it. So in terms of the mood that's coming out of national government, it's not policy yet, it's not adopted guidance, but I think you can probably infer from that where it's going. Again, I wouldn't say to you, consider that as a planning consideration for taking your decision tonight. The thing you should be considering is the site is within a 50-minute walk of a railway station and it's inherently sustainable in that regard. So it both joins up really where it's going. So
okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kashmir Singh, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points I just want clarification on. Some of the speakers have spoken regarding the parking. Is all the parking claimed spaces, including that reserved for companies and so on? Anecdotally, I live in Maidenhead, so I know the claimed parking spaces aren't available. And as far as Vickers Way goes in Stafferton, due to safety and other issues, people don't use that and they won't use it. 2 years ago, when we were elected, 2.5 years ago, Vickers Way's parking was about 10 vehicles a day. Now it's about 20% use. So the real issue is the claimed parking spaces aren't those available for the public. Most or large amount is reserved for either residents or company use. And the second is, as this project is commercially and financially seems unviable at 1.5%, are we going to even see a penny of S106 contributions as claimed? If I'm not wrong, I've seen 2 other projects approved and they've come back where they want the conditions removed so they don't have to pay contributions of S106. And finally, the reason I came to the issue about parking is the return of so many people going back to work since COVID, from remote working to going back to office. So there will be more parking spaces required. Thank you.
So I was taking notes, we're going through it, so if I miss anything, do please pick me up on it. In terms of the parking allocations questions, essentially how much of it is allocated out to businesses, etc. Well, the methodology that's been employed by, this is both by the applicants, and we've also used our own council town centre team, will have taken into account those spaces that are allocated. They're basically by default taken, if that makes sense. So the data that Michael showed you in the presentation, and is also in your reports as well, shows the surplus spaces. That's what we're concerned about in terms of when we're looking at parking capacity. So really, whether it's someone parking in there because it's a user coming to the area, or whether it's someone coming here to work, it's really semantics, to be honest with you, because parking spaces are taken or they're not. So we're concerned about capacity when we look at these issues. And obviously, Michael's giving you those figures. Just to give you a bit more reassurance on that point as well, the 2 data sets, there's been one produced by the applicants. There's been one that we've done for thoroughness, given the gravity of the concerns that you raised on the 25th of September, using our own car parking team's data, and give 2 or 3% difference within that. They're basically saying the same thing. So I wouldn't split hairs in terms of the amount of spaces in that regard. So we're satisfied, and I hopefully members are too, that there's sufficient capacity in that. In terms of the Section 106 monies, and I think you referred to the viability process, without going into the nuts and bolts of the viability, when they do the viability assessment, they take into account the Section 106 ask that officers have got. So when Michael presented the application to you on the 25th of September, and in your reports as well, there's a full detailed heads of terms that are within that. That's then fed into the viability assessment. So essentially, where you've said that there's circa 1 or 2% sort of available within it, the 106 comes out before that number's generated. So basically, yes, there will be a 106 return to the council in the form of the heads terms that are set out in Michael's report.
Yeah, you can go ahead. Yep.
Situation where this project or any others, the developer says there is no more money and that we can't afford to pay the S106. Is there any recourse left to the council, or that's it? Thank you.
I'll give you the layman's answer, if that's okay, and I'll pass you to Sarah for a bit more of an eloquent answer. But the reality is the Section 106 is secured via the legal agreement. It's legally binding. They have to pay it. That's very, very simple. There are trigger points set out in that agreement by which they have to pay. And if they can't pay, it doesn't proceed beyond that. But I think Sarah might probably explain that in a slightly more legalistic sense.
Thanks, Chair. Well, I agree with what James has just said, but I suppose the additional bits that I would add is that if they wish to come back to the council within the first 5 years of the agreement and planning permission being issued, then they would need the consent of the council to vary any of the terms of the Section 106 agreement. So that should provide you with some reassurance. And in the event that they just ploughed on without payment of contributions, for example, the council would have the ability or the discretion to enforce the terms of that legally binding agreement that James has just mentioned. Thank you.
I'd like to, if I could come back to that, what if the company claims that if they had to pay that, they would go bankrupt? We're not going to then force them not to carry on with the construction and this site or something else and just leave a hole in the ground, as it were, half constructed, are we? So we're dealing with semantics here that we can force them. We're not going to make a company go bankrupt if they're already at 1.5% profit. That's going to evaporate before next year because we're at 5% inflation, RPI.
Sorry, I'm getting my buttons mixed up. I mean, effectively, we've got to consider the application that's before us, and that's what we're being asked to consider and make a decision on. And that's what any other decision maker who might have this application to make a decision on, if we don't do that tonight, would have to consider as well. We secure the provisions in the Section 106 agreement. They're binding. Both parties have signed up to them. The only way they could subsequently be changed is if there was an application to amend them, which would have to be considered by the local authority to see if it was happy to amend them or not in the circumstances. And if it wasn't, then potentially any right of appeal, depending on the specifics. But effectively, they are there. They can't be changed without the agreement of both parties. And we can't speculate on what future decisions might be made or might be made in the future. We've got to make a decision on the basis of the information that's before us tonight. We can't refuse permission just because something different might change in the future, and we're a bit worried about that.
It's just a very quick point for Councillor G. Singh and any of the members. Just referred to the question you put to me about the default yes within a 50-minute walk or railway station. I erroneously referred to that, and I do apologise for it. It's a consultation document. It's actually a written ministerial statement. The effect of that, by virtue of paragraph 6 of the framework, is it's a material consideration for your decision taking. Again, I hopefully haven't misled you because it's still a sustainable site, but I just wanted to make that clear for the record. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just for clarification on that, James, the default yes is a material consideration, is it?
So just to clarify on that, Steve Reed, the relevant minister, introduced those policy directions through a ministerial statement indicating that that's the intended direction and approach of the government. So the ministerial statement that Steve Reed made is a material consideration. I would say, as James said earlier, that's a consideration, and it also quite strongly gives you an idea of what the government's current priorities and direction is. But the reality is that this is an allocated site within the borough local plan for redevelopment, for a mixed-use development. So in principle, the answer is a default yes under the current development plan and the tilted balance, regardless of that ministerial statement. But it is a material consideration.
Okay. Thank you. And Council agrees with that? Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
I don't have any other speakers on here for questions, so if you're all happy, I'm happy to open it up to debate now. Councillor Jack Douglas.
Thank you very much, Chair. So obviously we asked for more information on car parking, retail impact and fire safety when we deferred. I think there's some issues still remain around car parking. I mean, we can see that from the number of questions that have been raised already this evening. So I'm going to propose that we do consent the development, but we put in 2 additional conditions to make the scheme safer and to work better for the town from a parking perspective. I think the developer, I think we should ask, well, I think we should agree with the developer with section 106 contract that includes, because it's removing a large amount of on-street parking, you know, that demand is going to spill over into our car parks like Hines Meadow and Stafford Way. We all know that these car parks have got issues. So myself and Councillor Singh here on my left have noted that when we've sort of done our audit of them in the ward. So there are broken lifts, fire door problems, flooding, bad lighting, you know, maybe a couple of million of essential works that need doing. I know that one of the speakers said something along the lines of Hines Meadow needs to be made less awful as a priority. I mean, if we can get that, I mean, I think that will go a long way towards making this more acceptable from a parking perspective. So I think it's reasonable and necessary to say that the section 106 should include a large £600,000 contribution from the developers towards bringing these car parks up to a safe standard. But the second condition I want to propose is that I notice that police have raised several different concerns in their section about the design. I think we should do a secure by design audit and condition that for safety and security of the whole development. But on top of that, just going back to questions and answers earlier, if we can tweak condition 3 and 4 to, I mean, I'll go with officers' steer on this, just tweak it to specify a variety of materials rather than just that we have to consent them. And if we can, you know, steer along the lines of having a, you know, variety of tone in terms of light and dark as well. So yeah, that's my proposal, Chair. I mean, I know there are already something like 50 conditions attached to this, but, you know, I do think, Chair, that these additional conditions are both reasonable and necessary and in line with what members asked for previously. Thank you.
Just to clarify with you, Councillor Douglas, you are actually putting a motion to go with officer's recommendation, but with extra conditions.
Yeah, so not purely with officer's recommendations, but to consent with the existing recommendations, but the additional 2 conditions and tweaks to conditions 3 and 4 as well. Is that all clear?
Thank you for clarifying that. Thank you. Can I go next to Councillor Taylor, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm not a fan of this development, I'm going to say, but it's not a bad development and we need something in the town centre. I'm disappointed that we deferred on reasons and we haven't had the information that we asked for in the way that we asked for it. I was very specific when I spoke at the deferral regarding Hines Meadow and Stafford Way because, you know, our town centre is there for the foreseeable and we need to make sure that parking is available wherever that is going to be. And we need to know how well our car parks are going to hold up. So in that vein, I fully support Councillor Douglas's suggestion to add conditions for a contribution from the developer to make sure that our car parks are up to standard. Because my fear is we're going to exclude a major part of our population. Now, we know we have an ageing population and some people can't walk from Hines Meadows and can't walk from Vickers Way. Vickers Way, if you've got a big car, you can't get around it anyway. We know there's problems in Stafford and we know there's problems in Hines Meadow, and I had really hoped that more spaces would be made available, not necessarily disabled, because people do have mobility issues that don't qualify for a blue badge. So I'd hoped that there would be, you know, more parking in that vein made available, but I'm particularly irked that, you know, the information that we requested has not been forthcoming on, you know, what the issues are in our car parks and how much that would be to fix. I'm also quite concerned about the shop mobility issue, but I understand from the barrister, I know what you're saying, that they're a private tenant, but they are an essential service to a lot of people in Maidenhead. And that, you know, to have an interruption to the services they provide, we are excluding people from our town centre. Now, if we end up with a situation where elderly, people with mobility issues can't come into the town centre because they're being asked to park too far away, the footfall's not going to be there, the events are not going to be attended, it is going to be a disaster. And we need this development to work. We need it to work because we're at that point now where something has got to be done, but we can't just sorry, my water went on the floor, so I'm a bit, you know, we can't just ignore the fact that there are issues with this that we have voiced and that haven't really been addressed. So, you know, I'm very open to Councillor Douglas's suggestion about the monetary contribution. I think that's really important. There's no sill here. There's no affordable housing. Yet again, at least we can get a contribution that's going to actually assist us with the parking and actually encourage residents and give residents an opportunity to get into this new town centre and actually use it. Because I have a real fear that that's not going to happen. And it's going to be because they're not going to use the car parks, you know, or they're not going to be able to walk that far. And I'm sorry to bang on about it, and I feel like I am being a bit like a dog with a bone and banging a drum, but that's the reality of the situation. You know, yes, it's a 7-minute walk, not for everyone. And we know that as our, you know, as our population ages, and even in this development, we've got accommodation for elderly people. Granted, they are going to be in the development, but we're still adding more people into the mix. You know, their relatives that come and see them might be elderly as well. Do you see what I mean? It's an issue that's going to keep raising its ugly head. And if we've got, you know, if there's any possibility that we've got a chance right here, right now, to actually fix that, I don't want to be sat here in a position where I'm passing an application that's going to exclude 60% of our population because they're aging and they can't get into the town centre. That's not what I'm about. So I'd really like to hear other people's thoughts on that, because I feel quite strongly about it. But I mean, as a whole, you know, the application as it is, the only thing I would say is I don't know how many cafes and that you're going to get, because the whole success of the Waterside Quarter has been based on, you know, having covered eating areas. That's been a large part of its success. And I don't know, without putting a covered, you know, which we mentioned before, place in here, how that's actually gonna work, given that this week alone, 5 days ago, it was 17 degrees and now it's -2. That's an indication of the weather in the UK. You know, we can't rely on that weather. We do need to have, like, you know, weather conditioned seating areas. So anyway, I'm rambling. I'm going to be quiet.
A couple of points there. I think the officers wanted to come back on for Councillor Douglas and yourself, Councillor Taylor. Are you okay? Yep. Actually, come into Councillor Kashmir-Singh, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to second Councillor Douglas's motion. If we can get any extra parking, street parking for people who are disabled, that would be a big plus. As other speakers have mentioned, we do have an aging population in Maidenhead, and their friends or family who'll be visiting, they'll need parking spaces as well. So going forward, we've got to think for what's the future going to hold for those people as well. And we may have excess parking in our car parks, but it's unusable for a lot of the residents. So my concern would be that we're going to lose revenue by people living in Maidenhead going to shop elsewhere where it's easier. So if we can get some more parking in this development, and especially disabled parking there and on the street, that would be very welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Kashmir-Singh. Just to confirm, that's a seconder on that, but I still have some people registered to speak, and I know there's a few points that the officers wish to come back with. Councillor Gurj-Singh, please.
Yes, Chair, thank you very much. Yeah, I agree with colleagues over here, Councillor Singh, Kashmir-Singh and Councillor Douglas. What we need to do is we need to go hard on the developers. We need to make the developers pay for the infrastructure improvements in our borough when they're in the area and they're using council assets. I did carry out an audit with Councillor Douglas of the 3 main car parks following the previous meeting. And the works that we noted, there were quite substantial work that was required. I won't go through the whole report, but Vickers Way, there was cracking there was water ingress, there was lift failures, broken barriers, There was issues in Staffordham Way as well, and subsequently Staffordham Way has appeared in the local press in the front page of the Maidenhead Advertiser. We've had a serious incident in there, and there's issues there with the lighting, and also Hines Meadow, there's extensive deterioration there. There's failed lifts, there's outdated lighting, line marking, and lots of issues. What we need to do, we need to fix this mess of the car parks. The work that we looked at, we've carried out estimates and consulted with our own professional advisors. And Vickers Way looked at £420,000 repair, 248,000 for Staffordham Way, and about just over £1 million for Hines Meadow. It was about 1.7, 1.8 million in total. The £600,000 Councillor Douglas has come to. This is a formula that we used, and so mathematically we've worked it out roughly about a third. It's worked out, and this is the impact that this development will have, and the overspill of parking from this development due to the reduction of parking from the extent parking scheme to the new scheme. So we've just sort of carried that over. So I agree, we need to go down there. The other things that I did want to just bring up is a tightening of some of these conditions. We need to be very strict with these conditions. This is a major town centre regeneration, and what we need to make sure is that as the town grows and develops, and we need to keep the existing businesses afloat and supported. The first one I wanted to talk about was a hoarding that's going to be around the site. So the hoarding that's going to be facing the High Street, the Broadway, King Street, and the Nicholson Walk. We need to make sure that this is presented well to the residents. We've had lots of hoarding around the town centre, which has been covered in graffiti and damage. So some sort of decorative hoarding would be preferable for us. Lighting, CCTV, some sort of antisocial behaviour measures, and sort of clear and safe pedestrian diversions. And also other things. I'll leave it to officers to formalise this. But some sort of business wayfinding signage and, regular inspections, that would be preferable on the hoarding. Some sort of sensible condition that keeps the town centre looking attractive and vibrant throughout the development. And when it comes down, then it makes a big impression. The other thing I wanted to, so we've spoken about the medical, the hoarding we've spoken about, the car park mitigation, Councillor Douglas has put that very sensible condition forward, and also the audit for the secure by design. Thames Valley Police had raised some concerns. Lastly, I just wanted to talk about another issue that some residents have raised regarding the tall buildings. I know the height has been reduced from 25 stories to 20 stories on the largest building, but what I wanted to talk about was an issue that some residents have raised in terms of creating a wind tunnel type effect in that area. And what we really need is we need to have a condition in place to prevent that. The officer report talks about microclimate condition. So what I would like to have is some sort of assessment made at the end of the build, where the wind can be measured, and if it is sort of deemed to be, I don't know what the officers would do this, but if it is deemed to be sort of unacceptable, a little bit too windy, then some sort of landscaping or sort of baffles or some sort of clever design to sort of calm that wind down a little bit in that area. That's that, and I've seen it happen. They've done it in the Reading Station Hill development, a similar condition there. I think that's everything. If we can secure these stringent conditions, and obviously we need to make the developers pay for the infrastructure there. If we can do that before the development commences, that would be preferable. But I mean, if it's before occupation, then that's also going to be okay. But we need to keep the town and the borough working throughout this regeneration, and we need to unlock it. It's been 7 years since I first saw this application, And it should have, quite frankly, this should have been built and finished by now. It's been too long in the planning stages. And we just need to get on with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I bring in councillor Gosling, please?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add, I agree with councillor Taylor and Douglas regarding conditions and councillor Singh's recent a speech about the wind tunnel effect and a condition attached to that if possible. I also want to emphasise that I fully support the principle of regenerating Maidenhead Town Centre. And the Nicholson Centre has been declining for many years, and there's no doubt that change is both necessary and urgent if the town is to recover and thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Gosling. Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, sorry, just an afterthought. Conditions 40 and 41, which deal with the hard and soft landscape works, including tree planting. Could we specifically add a little bit of wording in there to ask the developers to use the most mature specimens they possibly can within that landscaping? So we're not just planting little saplings. We're planting something that should have a benefit in how it looks, and obviously, in the other benefits of having trees and shrubs in the area quickly rather than having to wait for them to grow. And also just putting it out there if the developers would liaise with local artists to have art on hoardings. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I've got no one else registered to speak. Does anybody else want to say anything? So bring you in, James, please. Oh, councillor Douglas. James, if you need to go ahead now. And councillor Douglas?
I don't know which way around.
He's happy with you to talk, yeah.
Subject to officers' feedback, those other conditions that we've been hearing proposed, I'm happy with them. If councillor Kashmir Singh is happy with them too, like the wind tunnel condition and the hoarding condition and so on.
If you're both happy with that, did you want to go ahead, James? Are you happy with that, councillor Singh? Yes.
So I've got a couple of things to wrap up here. So everything you said, if I don't mention it, Adrian's been writing these things down. I think there's smoke coming out of his notepad next to me at the moment. So we'll go through the list before you move to any recommendations tonight, just to make sure we're all crystal clear. There are a couple of things we just need to unwrap. That's okay, just to make sure we are clear in terms of how and why we're making the recommendation. So in terms of just to let you know about the wind tunnel condition, not that I think it causes a substantive problem, but just in terms of what was undertaken as part of the application process, there was a computational fluid dynamic and wind tunnel testing. The documents are on the file should you wish to read that before bedtime. But that was undertaken and that all came back as acceptable. So in terms of the necessity for putting a condition on, and that's one of the tests that's set out in paragraph 57 of the framework, you would need to ask or satisfy yourself as decision maker whether that is a necessary condition. What I'd advise probably if you were pursuing that is just more of a compliance statement to make sure that what was considered at the application stage translates to being true and as built, so it's more of a compliance checking process. That would probably be the recommended way of dealing with that point. I'm getting nods, so that's good. The more substantive point to go through with you is just the discussions about 106 contributions and improvements to the car parking area. Now, just to be absolutely clear, the officer recommendation to you, I'm just going to be really, really clear in terms of the record of this, is that there is sufficient capacity in the car parks and that basically you're not reliant upon those car parks per se to make it work. But obviously what I'm hearing from members tonight is a different view to officers, which is you are giving weight to that factor and therefore placing reliance upon it. But what I'm hearing, and please do correct me if I'm wrong, is the car parks are suboptimal at the moment. For example, the provision of lifts aren't working, and that you'd want to see those things working to ensure you can actually use them as a car park. So I will bring in Jack at this point as well, just to tell you the difference in terms of what a 106 obligation can do, because that is determinative for the figure that it punches out at the other end, versus what it can't do, specifically in terms of a developer can't deal with a pre-existing problem, but they've got to make it work for development. But again, I'll let Jack use his eloquent tones to explain that to you.
Thank you, James. Yes, you'll remember that Michael, in his presentation, the office presentation at the start of this evening, he went through several different aspects of the decision-making process. And one of the things that he showed on the screen was Regulation 122 of the what's called the SIL regulations, the Community Infrastructure Levy regulations. Now, in order to rely on a planning obligation, and to include something within the planning obligation, you need to make sure that it does three things. So a planning obligation can constitute a reason for granting planning permission for the development if the obligation is A, necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms. So in other words, but for the obligation, the development would be unacceptable in planning terms. So that's a difficult aspect. The part B is directly related to the development. So any obligation needs to directly relate to the development and not, for example, to pre-existing issues. And C, it needs to be fairly and reasonably related in scale and kind to the development. So it's not a blank check. It has to relate to the development itself.
Thank you. Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Jack. That's really helpful. Just on those 3 points, so my perspective, so in terms of necessary, I mean, there's going to be direct impacts of this development on the existing car parks because there'll be, overspill because there's not a huge amount of parking in the development. So we're going to be having wear and tear on those car parks that we wouldn't otherwise. So your residents are going to be using our other car parks. So this is why I think it's necessary. In terms of being directly related, I mean, basically, simply speaking, these car parks are going to serve the development. Maybe we're just about okay getting by with things as they are without, all the new residents, all the new shopping, all the new retail, but we're not going to be after the development's finished. But I mean, I suppose the big question is what's reasonable? I mean, my view is that the scale of this development, the huge scale of it means that the applicant is, leaning on the council to support their development. So, for me, the £600,000 is, it's reasonable in the sense that we've got a big bill for these car parks. We're not asking them to pay all of it, but we're asking them to pay a reasonable proportion of it to bring them up to scratch to support the development.
Councillor Douglas, you want to come in?
Yeah, so I think just to go back to this point, I think there was a list of a number of car parks and a list of measures that Councillor Singh put forward as the starting point for the figure that you guys have come to. Apologies for using the phrase "guys." That's not the best phrase to use in a committee meeting, but I'll go with it. And I think listening to that list, I can see where the logic has come from. But where it very much concerns me is it very much sounds in that form as a list of all of the maintenance, all of the general requirements of maintaining those car parks, which one would have expected the landowner of the car parks to have undertaken. And quite a few of those things, it would be quite difficult to argue would genuinely be required for this development to work and deliver the outcomes which have been proposed and which we're assessing, which I guess is where we need to get to with the planning contribution. It needs to be the figure that's necessary to make sure that the development delivers the positive benefits to the town centre that members are voting on, but without straying into covering other matters. I think officers obviously have done some work in the background anticipating, based on discussions last time, that this might be a concern for members. And where we came to was, I think, the key thing, or the key things, which we thought would probably be necessary to deliver the positive outcomes that the development's hoping to deliver, would be that people would be able to use the main town centre car parks, including people with disabilities or people with children with buggies, etc., and things like that. And that they would be able to go from the car parks and have a legible and pleasant route with nice pavements, etc., to the development. But also bearing in mind that we can't ask the developer to fix the entirety of an issue if some of it's the responsibility, and we can only ask them to do what's necessary to deliver the benefits, not go beyond that. And the fact that we have to bear in mind the development viability, that we do have financial viability assessments, and while it works, it is tight. There isn't an infinite pot of money. So the work that officers have done in the background would suggest a figure of around 250,000, which would probably go towards works in Hines Meadow car park, principally to try and deal with some of the lifts and accessibility issues, and also some to go towards some key areas of the high street where some improvements could be made to improve the link to the development, to make sure, you know, people do want to come and park in that car park and they can get to the development from it. And that's a nice experience, which I think is necessary to deliver the outcomes, and also hope, well, it's probably a positive thing for the developer if the people who might want to use it and shop there can actually get down in the lift and have a pleasant experience getting there. So the figure that our work has led to is a figure of around 250,000. It's for members to debate and make a decision, obviously, but I thought I would provide that guidance and steer.
Thank you, Adrian. Councillor Gorsing, please.
Thank you, Chair. Look, this scheme, look, it removes a substantial amount of parking on site from the previous scheme. That means hundreds of residents, visitors and workers from this development will rely on Vickers Way, Stafford Way and Hines Meadow. The problem is these car parks are simply not safe, and they're not in a usable condition today. Lifts are broken, we've got failed fire doors, flooding, lighting issues, and barriers don't work. So we have clear compliance issues. Under the Borough Local Plan policies IF2 and IF3, developments must mitigate their transport and parking impacts. The NPPF is clear. Access must be safe, suitable, and not create unacceptable impacts on the network. And Regulation 122, as you mentioned, only asks three things: necessary, directly related, and reasonable. This condition meets all three. If this development is going to lean on these car parks, then it must bring them up to a safe standard. We're not asking for all of the money. We are, as a local authority borough, we've been fighting for months, and we've secured some funding. But what we are asking the developers to pay their fair share and their proportion. Councillor Kashmir Singh is very right. The developers should pay, and we should make them pay. And if they don't pay, and they don't pay their obligations, then we've got the barristers in the room, so we don't go there. What we want to do, we want this £600,000, so it's tied strictly to essential safety, accessibility, and operational works. It's a fair share, and it's proportional. We've used our formula when we carried out our audit. We're not asking them to repair all the lifts and everything. It's just this is simply a contribution that the overfill of parking would have on the car parks. And I'll rest it there. I think members have made their views very clear on this condition. Thank you very much.
Do you want to go? Jack, did you want to come in?
In terms of, there's a couple of points there. So that you made a point in relation to unacceptable impacts, and I think that was in relation to highways policy in the National Planning Policy Framework. It's important to note that the Local Highways Authority has made no objection in this case, and officers have also recommended that there is there is no highways reason for refusal. And so in terms of unacceptable impacts on highway safety, no one's suggesting that that's the case. In terms of the point on seal compliance and the Reg 122 test, it's important that there's an evidential basis upon which members say that the figure meets Reg 122, the Reg 122 requirements. And so officers have obviously offered their view on what they think is appropriate in the circumstances. It's important when making a lawful and a rational decision that members are satisfied that they have the evidential basis upon which they can reach their conclusion.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Singh.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, thank you very much, Jack, for that. We've read the reports, we've looked at the highways reports, but what's missing from there is a detailed audit of these car parks. And that audit has been carried out by myself and colleagues. We've got the audit, we've seen the evidence, we've seen the public concern that's been in the Maidenhead advertiser on the front page after following the meeting. None of this has been picked up in the officer reports. And you know, rightly so, we need to fix this mess. We need to get these car parks up to standard. We've been working around the clock, and all what we're looking for is a fair and reasonable proportion. So thank you very much. We take your advice and we listen to it, but personally we do not agree on that one. So we just thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Councillor Taylor, please.
Thank you, Chair. At the risk of making myself really unpopular, the panel clearly had strong feelings about this parking. Now, one of the deferral reasons was for parking, and we specifically asked for information which 2 months later we do not have in front of us. So we are asking for a condition that mitigates that we would be happy with. Or you're going to look at a very real possibility this could be deferred again for the same reason. And there's another deferral reason, which was the retail, where we asked for an independent report with statistics, and realistically all we've got is a puff piece and somebody's opinion. Now, you know, we're not trying to be difficult. We asked for information, we haven't received it. We're sitting here saying, okay, fair enough, you know, here's another way around it. And all I appear to be hearing is resistance. Now, I get it. I really do get it. But the fact of the matter is, you know, if we don't get car parks that, you know, this development is relying on to a set standard, nobody's coming into this town centre. Most of the population will not come. The development will fail. The retail will fail. Nobody's going to be coming to these events. This is so important. Now, I'm not, you know, I'm not in the business of being awkward, although some of my friends might actually contest that. But this is a real concern for a lot of residents. And we're trying to, you know, make a compromise and give another way around this. You know, we would not be sat here saying this if we had the information we'd asked for on the deferral reason. So I just want to point that out, that, you know, we're not being awkward. We can only make, you know, a decision on what we've got in front of us, and we haven't got the information we asked for. So therefore, this is our alternative.
I agree, Councillor Taylor, and about closest car parks as well. Can I go to Councillor Douglas, please?
Yeah, just very briefly, I want to thank, you know, officers and the legal opinion. We do listen to you very carefully and take it very seriously. But I mean, as things are, I mean, having noted everything that's been said, I think the condition in the proposal is the one I'd like to see go to a vote. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
I think I just need to come in a bit further. Firstly, just to clarify, what we're talking about wouldn't be a condition. It would be a section 106 head of term. So we would have to have a legal agreement that was agreed with the applicant behind the scenes through a legal agreement, and it would have to go into the right level of detail about what could be there. So it wouldn't be a condition. I'm slightly worried that there are potentially viability issues because we know viability is tight, and we do need to make sure that those are worked through. And I am wondering, there is always discussion and debate that has to happen between officers and the applicant and the legal teams on these things. I'm wondering if a way forward may be a resolution to grant, subject to some further discussions with the applicant on a contribution up to a cap of 600,000, but where we would look at precisely where the money would go and make sure we've actually taken into account the viability side of things, because obviously what we don't want to do is grant something that we can never sign the legal agreement on, or that we sign the legal agreement on and then never gets off the ground. So what I'm wondering is if we do a resolution to grant, subject to further details on a section 106 contribution of up to 600,000, but with the final detail of that contribution, the final amount and the final details to be agreed with the chair, or potentially with the chair in discussion with other members. What I don't want to do is end up with a resolution tonight that ends up stalled and we can't take forward any further without another committee meeting, or further delays that potentially derail the entire development. So if members are happy with that way forward, where we take the headline, have some further discussions, and then agree it with the chair outside the meeting, then that would be my suggestion.
The only worry I do have with that, we've just the wording up to a cap. That could be £1 to 600k. So we would need to probably firm that up so it's stronger.
I mean, I think if we said a minimum of 250 and a maximum of 600, obviously the officer team in having those discussions will take a strong steer from what members have said of what members would like to see. We just need to make sure that we don't end up putting in an amount that derails things from a viability point of view, or that isn't justifiable when considered against the section 122 test. And that's a very difficult thing to do in a live meeting like this. So we do need to do that behind the scenes with a bit more work. So we'd say between 250 and 600.
Can I just bring in Councillor Douglas, please?
Chair, consultation.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that reassures me about that really, above all else, is I know how strong the chair is. And it's absolutely vital this is in consultation with the chair. But if the chair agrees for wider consultation with the panel members as well, if that's practical.
Absolutely. I think we need to have our discussions as well. It's not just the one way. Yeah. Councillor Taylor?
It's all right, Jack's just
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, just to really make clear, I just want to give members a bit of reassurance on this point. The purpose for taking this away and speaking and liaising with the chair with yourselves via the chair is to make sure that number is grounded in evidence. And it's and I'm very sorry to be purist and boring in this respect, but we can't fall foul of the law, because I'm saying that with a barrister and a solicitor looking at me here. So the main thing is to make sure it's enshrined in an evidence base that we can come back to you, fully set out the number that we've got to, so that you guys have got full transparency in terms of that overall figure, because I'm conscious not to pluck a figure out of thin air because it's comfortable tonight, and making sure it is grounded in that evidence base. Thank you, Chair.
Does anybody else say anything? I've got no one else on my speaker. Would you like to do summarise? Oh, sorry. Councillor Baskerville, sorry, I missed you there.
Yeah, I think the point's made, and I think it's worth stressing. I think it's already been made, but I'll just stress it. Is the fact where what we're asking for is to make the quality of the car parking such that people will be encouraged to come into town. At the moment, I think under the current situation, we're talking about viability. That viability will be affected if people don't come into town. Therefore, it's in everybody's interest to get the car parking right, and therefore people will come in because they know they've got lifts which work, they know they've got decent lighting, the security and safety are all aspects. Now, I think this will help secure that.
Absolutely, and Councillor Taylor mentioned that as well. They just won't come if it's still like it is now. Councillor Gergesing?
Thank you. All I wanted to say, just to inform you, but you know, once obviously this is agreed, we don't want this sort of to hold up the development. We want that agreed as quickly as possible. Yeah, I mean, I know you're going to have the wording, but what I was going to say is, we realise there's a lot of conditions on this site already. There's over 55 conditions, I think, on this site. It's more conditions than we've put on any site in this town. And I know there's also an application as well. There's another detailed application that'll probably be coming through on the site, which is outlined. But we obviously, you know, want to see these applications come forward. We don't want to this site locked up again. We want it unlocked and sort of, you know, accelerated through the development. So just want to make that clear that, you know, you get them contracts signed up as quickly as possible and conditions discharge. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. I'll just bring in James.
Yeah, what we propose is just informally to you as members that we'll take this away this week, next week after committee. We'll bottom this out with the applicants and report it back to you ASAP. In a nutshell, that means that if you weren't satisfied for whatever reason, and I wouldn't want to bring a proposition back to you but you're not satisfied, then it would come back to the next committee because it's within everyone's interest to, frankly, put this site to bed and move forward.
Agree with that. Yeah, I've got no other speakers at all at the moment. So if you want to summarise, there's quite a few conditions there. So.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So if I try and cover off the summary of the recommendation. So the recommendation is to approve, subject to the Section 106 agreement and conditions in the officer's report and the update packs and presentation, subject to the following. So amendments to conditions 3 and 4 to include a variety of materials, just to make clear that it shouldn't all be bright red brick everywhere, etc. An additional conditional conditions, and I will say this throughout because it's a hybrid permission, members will note we have 2 conditions for most things because one relates to the outline and one for the detailed, to deal with the submission, approval and subsequent completion in accordance with secured by design details. So we'd get additional detail about security measures in the site and secure those. Additional details, which would be a prior to commencement condition about hoarding, lighting, CCTV and public art during the development process to encourage a pleasant environment and the maintenance of the vitality and viability of the town. A condition which would be a prior to occupation condition for each phase relating to further assessment of wind tunnel effects and additional measures. Just for clarity, what I'm envisaging here is we already have a wind tunnel assessment. We know that the main big buildings, etc., will be where they are, but sometimes things to do with the scale of landscaping or features that might be in the street to do with event spaces and things can impact on that. So it'd be proof checking that what has been said in the original statements is delivered to an acceptable degree, and potentially additional measures to fix any problems. And I think we do it phase by phase, which is how the original wind assessment was done. There would then be a tweak to the landscaping conditions to encourage mature trees. I would highlight that that will be a matter we have to deal with as officers with the landscape officer, because there is a balance in terms of tree health. If you plant a really mature tree, it is likely to have less lifespan and be there for less time than if you plant a sapling. So there's a balance. Yeah. So we will tweak the condition to say as mature as possible. And then there is an additional informative just to encourage a positive solution on shop mobility or working proactively to deliver that. And then the additional section 106 contribution towards car parks and links to the development, public realm links to the development, which would be a minimum amount of 250,000 up to 600,000, with the details to be agreed between officers and the applicant and reported to the chair for agreement or otherwise. And if the agreement isn't there, that the application would be referred back to committee as soon as possible. So that would be the recommendation, Chair.
So just to summarise summarise your summarise, it's getting longer and longer. That was proposed, this, with all those conditions, is proposed by Councillor Douglas and seconded by Councillor Kashmir Singh. So if we could go ahead with the vote.
So to clarify, it is green on your pads for, red for against, or yellow for abstaining from the vote. Is everyone happy with their vote? With that, I will stop. And that is unanimous, Chair, with 7 for, 0 against and 0 abstentions. And with that panel, I'm now going to begin a new vote for everyone, whether we are to continue the meeting as we've gone past 3 hours. So if you would all like to vote green if you are for continuing the vote, red if you are against continuing the vote, or yellow if you're abstaining from the vote. If everyone is happy with their vote, I can confirm that is 5 votes for and 2 against. So the meeting will continue.
Yeah. Just so everyone who's here for the next gender item, we're just going to take a short break. It shouldn't be a long item, so have a short 5-minute break. Right, so now on to the last planning application of the evening, and that's Lower Mount Farm, Long Lane, Cookham, Maidenhead. Can I hand over to Maria, please, to present this one? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The site comprises an area within Lower Mount Farm located off Long Lane. The land is laid to pasture and is considered to be an established equestrian use. The site can be seen within the location plan on the screen. The wider site, it is depicted by the blue line, is enclosed by tree line along the perimeter, and the existing stable building is shaded light green on the plan. The application seeks planning permission for the erection of an outdoor menace with post and rail fencing. The proposed equestrian arena comprises an area of unvegetated and unsealed surface covering 2,400 square meters, 16 meters by 40. The menace will be enclosed by post and fence rail fencing measuring 1.4 meters in height. A resolution to grant planning permission subject to a satisfactory completion of an undertaking to secure the on-site B&D for development was made at the Maidenhead Development Management Committee on the 23rd of January 2025. The application is referred back to the Planning Committee with a revised recommendation to grant planning permission with a mandatory biodiversity net gain instead, secured through the recommended condition. The reason for this being that as there's no significant on-site enhancement proposed for the development, the biodiversity net gain is for the development can be secured by the condition rather than the legal agreement as part of the planning application. To remind everyone for development, this slide shows the post and rail fencing proposed on site and the layout of the equestrian arena measuring 40 by 60. And the cross-section of the arena, and also notes the proposed materials. And moving on to some photographs, it's clear that the surrounding area is predominantly rural in character. It should be noted that the immediate vicinity consists of mixed-use development, with the nearest residential property being Lone Mount Farm cottages, approximately 125 meters from the proposal. The slide shows the existing equestrian paddocks on site, looking from the stable buildings towards the southwest. Finally, these photographs show the views from the application site towards the residential properties along Long Lane. The photograph at the bottom right of the site shows the existing access when viewed from Long Lane. In summary, the proposed development relates to outdoor sports provision in the borough, and it has been demonstrated that the development will constitute appropriate development within the green belt. Furthermore, the proposed development will be of a form which would be in keeping with the character and appearance of the surrounding area, will not result in unacceptable harm to amenities of surrounding properties, will not result in unacceptable harm to highway safety in the surrounding area, and subject to the recommended conditions, will not result in harm to protected species, and the associated biodiversity enhancements will be secured by the recommended conditions. No other changes are proposed with regard to proposed development. Moreover, the proposals would accord with the Cookham Parish neighbourhood plan. There is no material changes in policy or circumstances. The earlier resolution to grant planning permission, to which significant weight is afforded to by the officers. The application is therefore recommended for approval subject to conditions listed in section 13 of the committee report. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Before I open up to the floor, we've got 3 speakers. Can I first call up Cookham Parish Council Bill Perry, please? And when you're ready, you've got 3 minutes with a 1-minute warning. Thank you.
Let me make it very clear in starting that on behalf of the Parish Council, we do not object to this application in principle. It's fine with us. Equine use is well acceptable in a rural part of the parish. And so we are here simply to make 2 points. that arise out of the passage of the Cookham Neighbourhood Plan, which was adopted by this borough on the 9th of September. Because it seems to us that conditions 4 and 5, as proposed, do not take proper account of the Cookham Neighbourhood Plan. The two policies of the Neighbourhood Plan we'd like to refer to are CEN1 and CEN2. They're both mentioned in the opening of the plan, where the officers mention what is relevant. But it seems to us that condition 4D, as in the plan, which says that any registered off-site biodiversity gain allocated to the development, etc., almost presupposes that the biodiversity net gain will be off-site and doesn't put any limits, if so, on where it is. Whereas policy CEN1 of the plan and CEN2 of the neighbourhood plan say, respectively, firstly, that any biodiversity net gain should be on site where practical. And secondly, the application itself makes it clear that in all probability that is practical. And secondly, policy CEN2 makes it clear that any off-site net gain should be within the parish if possible. And this condition makes no reference to where any off-site net gain should be from. And therefore, it seems to us it ignores two important parts of policy CEN1 and 2. Secondly, the officer's assessment makes no reference to the fact that policy CEN 2.4 refers to green corridors, which are important for the movement of wildlife, one of which runs up the entire south side of Long Lane and therefore across the access to this site. CEN 2.4 says that green corridors should be maintained and, if possible, enhanced in any application. Paragraph condition 5 makes no reference to this. We would therefore like to ask you to insert the words "and Cookham Parish Neighbourhood Plan policies CEN1 and CEN2, both to the sentence in condition 4 beginning the biodiversity net gain plan shall be prepared with, and in condition 5 in the sentence beginning the relevant, relevant policies local plan NR2. So if you just add the same words to each of those two conditions in those sentences, we shall be very happy. But otherwise, we're very happy with the proposal. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Can I call Emma Brinkworth next, please? Thank you. You have 3 minutes and 1 minute warning. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors and chair, for allowing me to say a few words in support of this application. My name is Emma Brinkworth by Brinkworth Livery, and I'm the applicant for this application and the operator of the equestrian yard at Lower Mount Farm. I grew up on a farm in Devon and I've been riding horses from a very young age. I have a first-class honours degree in animal science from the University of Reading, and I'm also a British Horse Society accredited professional coach. I am very local to Cookham, living on Cockmarsh, and I've lived in the area for 12 years. I have 2 children that go to school locally in Bourne End. The equestrian stables at Lower Mount Farm are fully occupied with a waiting list, and the proposed outdoor menage is desperately needed and being requested by my livery clients. An outdoor menage is a common and very important part of an equestrian facility to safely exercise the horses. It's particularly important in the autumn and winter months when paddock grass growth shuts down, mud arrives, and the off-site roads are more slippery. It's also important through the summer months when the ground is too hard and impacts on the horses' joints. This menage would provide a controlled environment on a level, drained, professional sand and fibre surface unaffected by the inclement weather. Exercising horses on wet, slippery ground is unsafe for both the horse and rider. Equally, as mentioned above, exercising on hard ground can lead to strains, sprains and injuries. This means that it's incredibly beneficial from a welfare point of view as well. There are a large proportion of young riders at Lower Mount Farm, so from a safety aspect, a menage is of the utmost importance. To be clear, the proposal as set out in the planning officer's report is for a sand and fibre surface menage, not a rubberised surface, and without any floodlights. So the concerns of Councillor Barr and the Parish Council are adequately addressed on this front. We have positioned the menage in a logical location, 95 metres away from Long Lane at its closest point and adjacent to the yard and stables. There is also well-established landscape screening along Long Lane and established landscape screening to the south and east of the menage. There is also mixed scrub planting proposed as part of the scheme, which would deliver landscape enhancements and an
1 minute
11%
remaining.
biodiversity net gain. The planning officer's report has clearly confirmed that this proposal is appropriate development in the Greenbelt, that it would be in keeping with character and appearance of the area. It would not harm the amenities of surrounding properties and not result in unacceptable harm to highway safety. There are also no objections from any residents to this application. To be clear, there are no changes to this application other than how the biodiversity, net gain and ecology matters are delivered now by an appropriately worded planning condition. I hope that the councillors will support the planning officer's recommendation to support this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. And finally, I've got Councillor Howard, who I believe is online. Thank you.
Thank you. First time I've ever done this from home, but I have to say I was very impressed at the united council approach on the last subject. And this time you've also got a united approach from the people speaking on behalf of this subject. We're very much in favour of it. The challenge that we have is that we are concerned about how the Cookham neighbourhood plan is not being referenced proactively and possibly not used as fully as it possibly could be. We have only just received this plan coming under legal control in the summer, and we would like it to be referenced a lot more firmly. There's no point in putting a plan together, spending a lot of money and time, and not having it become part of the planning discussions. The second thing, as Bill said, we're very happy with it. The 2 points that he suggested, I can't disagree with. I support. We have to have the neighbourhood plan referenced. And lastly, the absence of any mention about the green corridors was concerning in this plan. Most of all, we want this biodiversity net gain spent in Cookham, preferably on site, but definitely in Cookham. We all live in Cookham, and that's where any problems which it's caused will have to be offset. And after that, have a nice evening.
Thank you, Councillor Howard. So that's the last of the speakers. So I'm ready to open up to the floor if anybody's got any questions. Councillor Baskerville.
Yeah, I just want a bit of clarification, possibly from the officer, about what the applicants have said, and the speakers have said about the Cookham neighbourhood plan. Are they, can that be added to the statement in here? So, you know, we could give it the thumbs up, or is that going to be a problem?
I mean, my taking of what was being said is effectively it's not an issue to do with any of the content of any of the conditions. It's simply a concern from the parish that the policies of the Cookham plan, neighbourhood plan, weren't mentioned. Which, in honesty, I suspect is simply because we're referring back an old application. We can easily, without any impact, add in the relevant policies from the Cookham neighbourhood plan to the reasons for those conditions, which would cover that off. I don't actually think there is any misunderstanding about the approach to biodiversity net gain in any event, under the manner in which the authority without the Cookham neighbourhood plan always dealt with biodiversity net gain. We would always seek for it to be as close to the site as possible, then further away in the area, then elsewhere in the borough, and the absolute last resort would be outside the borough or elsewhere. So while I know that it's being raised, that is the manner in which I would have expected officers to deal with the discharge of these conditions in any event.
Thank you, Adrian. Can I go to Councillor Taylor, please?
Thank you, Chair. Can we just add the wording in, please? I understand what you're saying, but it is important that we do recognise that the Cookham neighbourhood plan has gone through, and it would look much more cohesive if it was in there. And if we can add that in, I'm happy to table recommendation to go with officers' approval as long as that wording is in there. Thank you.
Can we do that?
Yes, I was suggesting that we add it into the reasons for the condition, so that's absolutely fine.
Okay. Councillor Douglas, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a sort of technical question about BNG for officers. Are you aware of any sites in Cookham, in the parish of Cookham, that are suitable for mandatory BNG, as in whether you can have a habitat management and monitoring plan?
I mean, not off the top of my head in terms of sites that are allocated and known about, but there is plenty of open space within Cookham. It's a lovely area, as we all know, so it has plenty of open space, and there is other open space on this site and in proximity. So I have every confidence that it will be possible to deliver something nearby.
Okay, Adrian. Councillor Gershing, please.
Yeah, no, definitely. I support that as well. Yeah, I mean, maybe if there isn't, I mean, I know we've got the parish here, maybe they should have a site identified for the mandatory biodiversity net gain, because you know, the one way to get more biodiversity net gain is have more development, and you build more in Cookham, you get more BNG. I mean, you see our early application, we are 800% BNG, but yeah, this is a sensible application. This is in the right place, right development. It's a good application. I think we should all support it. There doesn't seem anything wrong with me on this one. I'm happy to support the recommendation and the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Councillor Gosling?
Saying I'm happy to support this, and so I second Gertrude Singh.
Councillor Taylor proposed, and then Councillor Singh seconded. He got in there before you, I'm sorry. So I've got no other speakers on my list, so if we're happy to go to the vote with the wording requested. I don't know if you could read it out again, just to clarify that.
I think my suggestion was that we update the reasons to include the policies from the Cookham neighbourhood plan that were being suggested. So if members are happy, I'd suggest that we simply take that away as officers and add the policies in.
And would that include a mini summary of, you know, what the neighbourhood plan suggests, with keeping it local in parish at least?
We could add an informative note to say that.
Informative. Thank you. So I think we're ready to go to the vote with the wording as suggested by the parish. Thank you.
Yes, also you've got the name vote in front of you. So if it's green, obviously for, red against, or yellow to abstain from the vote. Is everyone happy with their vote? If so, I can close the vote and confirm that as unanimous for approval, Chair.
Thank you, everyone. We've got one last agenda item, which is the planning appeals received and planning decision report. Are we happy to note this? Great, thank you. That's the end of the meeting. Thank you.